The memory you never talk about. You remember the kitchen light, don't you? Not the one in the kitchen you have now, the other one. The one that hummed just slightly when everything else was quiet. The one that made that small clicking sound when someone flipped the switch at night, and you'd hear it from your room and know someone else was awake too. It's strange what stays with you. You can probably recall the exact quality of that light. Not quite yellow, not quite white. The way it fell across the counter in a way that made 2A feel like a separate country. A place where the rules were different. Where you could stand in your pajamas, eating cereal that wasn't breakfast cereal, drinking water from a mug because all the glasses were in the dishwasher, and somehow that made sense. There's something about those hours that you've carried with you, isn't there? The house would settle. That's what they called it, the house settling, as if the walls themselves were finally exhaling. As if the whole structure had been holding its breath all day, pretending to be certain about its joists and beams. And only now, when everyone was supposed to be sleeping, could it admit that it was just wood and nails doing its best. You understood that feeling. Even then, you'd stand there and you'd listen, not for anything in particular, just listening because that's what you did when you couldn't sleep, when you already counted the ceiling cracks and rearranged your thoughts into neat little rows that somehow got messier the more you tried to organize them. You'd listen to the refrigerator's quiet conversation with itself, the way the heating vents would tick as they cooled, the distant sound of a car on a road you couldn't see, going somewhere you'd never know about. And you felt something then that you couldn't have named. It wasn't loneliness exactly. It was more like you were the only one awake in a sleeping world, and there was something both terrifying and comforting about that, like being trusted with a secret you didn't ask for. You'd think about the people sleeping in the other rooms. How strange it was that they were right there, 30 feet away, maybe less, but completely unreachable. In their own countries of sleep, behind their closed doors, breathing in rhythms you couldn't hear. And you'd wonder if they ever stood in their own kitchens at 2 a.m., looking at their own counters, feeling the same thing you were feeling but never saying it. Probably they did. That's what you've learned since then, without anyone ever teaching it to you directly. That everyone has their own version of that kitchen, their own humming light, their own hour when the day finally stops pretending and just is. You thought you were the only one who felt like this. You carried that belief for a long time. Through school hallways where everyone else seemed to have received an instruction manual you'd somehow missed. Through conversations that felt like you were translating from a language you only half spoke. Through years of nodding at the right moments, laughing when others laughed, learning to mirror expressions you'd studied like flashcards. But here's the thing they don't tell you. Everyone was doing that. Every single person in those hallways, in those conversations. At those parties where you stood near the wall and held the same drink for 2 hours because you didn't know what else to do with your hands. They were all translating too. They were all standing in their own kitchens at hours no one else knew about. You just thought you were the only one bad at hiding it. And maybe you were a little worse at it than some others. Maybe your face showed more than you wanted it to. Maybe you laughed half a second too late, or your eyes gave something away that you'd meant to keep private. Maybe people could tell you were thinking 3 thoughts behind the one you were supposed to be having. But that's not what you think it was. You were just aware. You noticed things. The way someone's smile would falter for just a moment before they caught it. The way a room would shift when someone left it, even if no one said anything. The way words could mean one thing on the surface and something entirely different underneath. And you were the only one who seemed to be listening to both frequencies at once. It was exhausting. Still is, sometimes. You learned to make yourself smaller because of it. Not physically, though maybe that too, but smaller in the way you took up space in conversations. In the way you'd start to say something and then stop because you could feel the weight of what you were about to say. And you knew it was too much, too honest, too raw for a Tuesday afternoon or a casual dinner or a work meeting where everyone was just trying to get through the agenda. So you'd swallow it, and it would sit there, in your throat, in your chest, in some unnamed place behind your ribs, where you kept all the other things you'd swallowed, and you'd tell yourself it was fine, that this was just what everyone did, that you were making it easier for everyone by keeping these things to yourself. And you were right, in a way, but you were also wrong, because those things you swallowed, they didn't disappear. They just moved. They rearranged themselves inside you, taking up residence in your shoulders, your jaw, the small space between your thoughts where they'd wait, patient as house cats for 2 a.m. to come around again, and then you'd be standing in that kitchen. Maybe not the same kitchen. Maybe not even a kitchen at all by then. Maybe it was a bathroom, door locked, sitting on the edge of the tub. Maybe it was your car, parked somewhere after work, before going home, stealing 15 minutes in a parking lot because you needed the space between who you were at work and who you were supposed to be at home. Maybe it was your own bed, awake while someone slept beside you, feeling more alone than you ever did when you were actually alone. But it was the same feeling. That 2 a.m. feeling, that humming light feeling, that feeling of being the only one awake in a world that demands you keep sleeping. There was a moment, you might not remember exactly when, but there was a moment when you realized that other people didn't seem to carry things the way you did. They'd have a bad day, and then the day would end, and somehow they'd just leave it there, like setting down a bag at the door, like it stayed in Tuesday and didn't follow them into Wednesday. You didn't understand that? Your Tuesdays came with you. Sometimes your Tuesdays from 3 years ago would show up on a Thursday morning, uninvited, with all their feelings intact. You'd be in the shower or making coffee or in the middle of a sentence, and suddenly there it was. That thing someone said, that moment you handled wrong, that look on their face that you've never been able to translate. And you thought that was your fault. You thought you were doing something wrong, holding on like that, not being able to let go, not being able to move forward the way everyone else seemed to move forward, clean and linear, like time was a staircase instead of a tangled ball of string that occasionally got caught on something sharp. But no one ever told you how they did it. No one sat you down and explained the mechanism by which you were supposed to release things. No one gave you permission to stop carrying what you'd been carrying. And you were too afraid to ask, because asking would mean admitting that you didn't already know, and by then you'd spent so much energy pretending you did. So you just kept carrying it, all of it, the small moments and the large ones, the things people said they forgave you for, but you never forgave yourself for, the chances you didn't take, the words you should have said, the words you did say that you've been trying to unsay ever since. And somewhere along the way, you stopped noticing the weight, not because it got lighter, because you got used to it, the same way you get used to the feeling of your own clothes, or the sound of your own breathing. It just became part of the landscape of being you, until someone asked if you were okay, and you said yes, automatically, because that's what you'd learned to say. That's what kept things moving. That's what prevented the conversation from going somewhere you didn't know how to navigate. But sometimes, after you said it, you'd catch yourself wondering what would have happened if you'd said no. Not dramatically. Not in a way that would require anyone to do anything about it. Just no. A quiet no. An honest no. A no that meant, actually, I'm not sure I've been okay in a while, and I don't know what to do about that, and I'm tired of pretending I do. But you didn't say that, because saying that would mean opening a door you weren't sure you could close again. And you'd spent so much time learning how to keep doors closed, how to keep things contained, how to portion yourself out in manageable pieces that didn't overwhelm anyone, including yourself. You became very good at that. People would tell you that you were easy to be around, that you were a good listener, that they could talk to you. And you'd smile and say thank you, and you'd mean it, because it felt good to be useful. It felt good to be the person who could hold space for others. You just didn't know where to put your own space. It's funny, isn't it? How you can become an expert at holding containers for everyone else while simultaneously forgetting that you re a container too, that you also have an inside, that you also have things that need somewhere to go. And the thing is, you knew this on some level. You knew it every time you found yourself awake at hours when sleep should have been easy. Every time you stood in the shower longer than necessary because the water felt like the only thing that was asking something of you. Every time you drove home the long way because the car was the only place where you could be exactly as you were without adjustment. You knew something wasn't quite right, but you didn't have the words for it. Or you had the words, but they felt too dramatic, too self-indulgent, too much like something people say when they want attention, and you definitely didn't want attention. You wanted the opposite of attention. You wanted to be so competent and so fine that no one would ever have to worry about you. Mission accomplished, by the way. No one worries about you. You've done an excellent job of that. But somewhere in the middle of achieving that goal, you made yourself a little bit invisible. Not to others, they still see you, but to yourself. You became so good at being what was needed that you forgot to check what you needed. You forgot that needing things wasn't a personality flaw. Or maybe you didn't forget. Maybe you never knew to begin with. Maybe you grew up in a house where needs were inconvenient, where feelings were things to be managed rather than felt, where the correct response to difficulty was to handle it quietly, privately, without burdening anyone else with the mess of your internal weather. And you learned that lesson very well. Too well, probably. You learned to weather your own storms in silence, to flood and drain and flood again without ever mentioning the rain, to smile through thunder, to apologize for your lightning. And it worked for a while, until it didn't, until the storm started lasting longer than the breaks between them, until you realized you couldn't remember the last time you felt actually rested, until rest itself started feeling like just another thing you were doing wrong, because you'd lie down and your mind would immediately start its inventory of every unfinished thing, every unresolved moment, every potential future disaster that you should probably be preparing for right now instead of lying there uselessly. And you'd think, other people don't do this. Other people close their eyes and just stop. They surrender to sleep like it's a friend instead of an opponent. They don't lie there negotiating with their own thoughts, trying to arrange them into positions where they take up less space. But maybe they do. Maybe they do, and they just don't say it. Maybe everyone has nights like yours and mornings where they wake up already tired. Maybe the whole world is full of people standing in their kitchens at 2 a.m., holding mugs of water, listening to houses settle, wondering if they're the only ones who feel like this. Maybe you're not as alone as you think you are. Maybe you never were. You've noticed something about conversations, haven't you? There's what people say, and then there's the space between what they say. The pause that lasts just a fraction longer than it should. The way their eyes move somewhere else for a moment before coming back. The breath they take before answering a question that should be simple. You hear those things. Most people don't. Or they do, but they don't mention it. Because mentioning it would mean acknowledging that there is a whole other conversation happening beneath the one everyone agreed to have. And that's uncomfortable. That requires more from people than they usually want to give on a random Wednesday. But you can't not hear it. It's like learning to see shadows. Once you notice them, they're everywhere. Every sentence has one. Every smile has a small darkness attached to it. Not bad darkness, just the truth darkness. The part that doesn't quite fit the shape of what's being said out loud. And you thought this made you paranoid. You thought this meant you were reading into things, overthinking, making problems that didn't exist. People told you that, sometimes, you're overthinking it. They'd say, and you'd nod and agree, because you didn't want to be the person who overthought things. But you weren't overthinking. You were just thinking at a frequency that others had learned to ignore. You were listening to the whole song instead of just the melody. And yes, sometimes that meant you heard things that people didn't mean for you to hear, or things they didn't even know they were saying. But you were usually right, weren't you? That person who said they were fine, they weren't fine. You knew it from the way they said it, from the way the word came out too quickly, too brightly. That friend who said it didn't matter, it mattered. You could feel the weight they were trying to make weightless. That moment when everyone laughed, and you knew one person was only pretending, you were right about that too. But being right didn't help, because you couldn't do anything with that information. You couldn't just say, I know you're not okay. I can hear it in the space between your words. That would be invasive, presumptuous. That would make you the person who makes things weird, who can't just let things be surface level and easy. So you stayed quiet, and you carried their unspoken things along with your own, until you became a walking library of things people never quite said, a collection of moments that existed in the margins. All those times someone almost told the truth but stopped. All those times you almost asked but didn't. It's heavy, that library. You don't realize how heavy until you try to rest. Until you lie down and discover that rest isn't just about your body being horizontal. It's about your mind being allowed to stop its cataloging, to stop cross-referencing every moment against every other moment, looking for patterns, trying to make sense of why people do what they do, when what they say and what they mean are two entirely different things. But your mind doesn't know how to stop that. It's been doing it too long. It's become the thing it does instead of resting. The way some people scroll their phones, you scroll through your accumulated observations, trying to understand something that maybe isn't meant to be understood, trying to solve something that isn't a puzzle. And somewhere in all of that, you forgot something. You forgot that you're allowed to stop understanding. You're allowed to let some things remain mysteries. You're re-allowed to not figure out what that person meant by that thing they said in 2019. You're re-allowed to release yourself from the obligation of solving everyone's hidden sadness, including your own. No one asked you to do that job. You assigned it to yourself because you could do it, and because someone had to, and because you'd rather be useful than rested. You'd rather be the person who understands than the person who needs understanding. But here is what no one tells you about understanding everyone else. It doesn't make you less lonely. Sometimes it makes you more lonely because you can see all the ways people are hiding, and you're hiding too, and everyone's pretending not to notice that everyone's hiding. It's like being at a masquerade where everyone knows everyone else is wearing a mask, but the rule is you have to pretend you believe the masks are faces. And you're tired of that rule, not angry at it, not defiant, just tired. Tired of the performance, tired of translating, tired of holding your own weight, plus the weight of everything you notice but can't mention. Tired of being the one who remembers what people were wearing when they said the thing they claim they never said. Tired of caring so much about moments that everyone else has already forgotten. You want permission to forget too. You want permission to be less aware, to notice less, to let things pass through you instead of sticking to you like burrs on clothing. You want to be the kind of person who can have a bad interaction and then just have dinner, move on, not replay it 70 times trying to figure out what you could have done differently. But that's not how you're built. You're built like someone who notices, who remembers, who feels the weight of small moments that others experience as weightless. And for a long time, you thought that was wrong, that you were broken in some fundamental way, too sensitive, too much, too exhausting to be around, probably, with all your noticing and remembering and feeling. But you're not broken. You're just awake in a different way. You're fluent in a language most people only speak as a second language, if at all. You're reading a book that others skim. And yes, that means you see more, feel more, carry more. It also means you're here right now, in this moment, still breathing, still trying, still hoping that somewhere there's a version of peace that doesn't require you to become someone you're not. And there is. It's just not the peace you thought it would be. It's not the peace where everything finally makes sense. It's not the peace where you stop noticing, stop caring, stop feeling things so deeply. It's the peace of letting yourself be exactly this aware, this sensitive, this much, this tired, this human. The peace of standing in your kitchen at 2 a.m. and instead of wondering what's wrong with you, just noticing, this is where I am right now. This is what I'm feeling. This is the shape of this particular moment, and that's enough. You don't have to solve it. You don't have to fix it. You don't have to make it mean something or learn something from it or turn it into growth. You just have to let it be what it is. A moment in a kitchen with a humming light, and you standing there, still here. You've always been a little suspicious of people who seem sure about things, not in a judgmental way, more like curious, envious, maybe. The people who can say, I am a morning person, or I don't like seafood, or I've always known what I wanted to do with such finality, as if they received some internal memo about themselves that you never got. You never felt sure like that. You'd say things, of course you did. Everyone has to say things. But there was always this small asterisk next to every statement you made about yourself. I think I'm more introverted, maybe, depending on the situation, and who's there and how I am feeling that day, and whether Mercury is in retrograde. That's closer to your truth. But you learned quickly that people don't want that answer. They want the clean version. So you'd give it to them. You'd sand down your maybes into something that sounded more like certainty. You'd practice in the mirror, sometimes not the words exactly, but the face. The face of someone who knows themselves, who has arrived at conclusions about who they are, and can present those conclusions without wavering. It felt like learning a part in a play you never auditioned for. And the strange thing is, you got good at it. Good enough that people would tell you that you seemed confident, put together, like you had it figured out. And you'd smile and say thank you. And inside you'd think, if only you knew how much effort this is. If only you knew that I've been awake since 4 a.m., having an argument with myself about whether I am actually a good person or just someone who has learned to simulate being a good person convincingly enough that no one has noticed the difference. But you never said that part. You learned early that people have a limited capacity for uncertainty, especially uncertainty about fundamental things. They want to believe that people know themselves, that there's a solid core to everyone, a true self that remains constant, that makes decisions based on clear values and beliefs. And maybe other people have that. Maybe other people wake up knowing who they are, and that person is the same person they were yesterday and will be tomorrow. Maybe their sense of self isn't something that shifts depending on who's in the room, what time of day it is, how much sleep they got, whether they've eaten, what the weather's doing. But yours does shift, not in a disordered way, not in a way that means something's wrong with you, just in a way that feels honest, like you're responding to reality instead of pretending you exist separate from it. Like you're a tuning fork that can't help but respond to the frequency of whatever room you're in. And people don't like that. They don't like it when you say, I don't know, too many times. When you can't commit to a restaurant choice or a weekend plan or a 5-year vision of where you see yourself. They start to worry about you. Or worse, they start to lose patience with you. You need to decide, they say. You need to figure out what you want. As if you haven't been trying to do exactly that your entire life. As if the problem is lack of effort, rather than an excess of seeing too many sides of everything. Too many possibilities. Too many ways any given choice could unfold. Too many versions of yourself that could exist depending on which door you walk through. And you know what the worst part is? You can see their certainty starting to crack too. You can see the moments when their firm beliefs waver, when their clear sense of self gets confused, when they don't know what they want either, but they can't admit it because they've built their entire identity on being the kind of person who knows. And you feel for them. You feel for them the way you'd feel for someone who's been holding a heavy box for too long and won't put it down because they're afraid people will think they're weak. You want to tell them, it's okay. You can put it down. You can not know. You can be uncertain and still be a whole person. But you don't tell them that because they didn't ask. And because saying it would reveal that you see them more clearly than they see themselves. And people don't like that. People don't like being seen past their carefully constructed certainty. So you just nod when they give you advice about being more decisive. You thank them for their concern about your inability to commit to things. You let them believe that their way of being is the right way, and yours is something you need to fix. And then you go home, and you stand in your room or your kitchen, or wherever you stand when you're trying to make sense of things. And you wonder why it feels so hard just be a simple, straightforward person with clear preferences and obvious desires. Why can't they just like what you like and dislike what you dislike and know what you know without all this complexity? But here's what you've started to understand, slowly, in these quiet moments when no one's watching. Maybe the complexity isn't the problem. Maybe the complexity is just what it looks like when someone's actually paying attention. When someone is actually feeling their way through life, instead of following a script they memorized so long ago, they've forgotten they're reperforming. Maybe you're not indecisive. Maybe you're just honest about the fact that most decisions don't have clear right answers. That most choices come with trade-offs. That wanting two different things at the same time doesn't make you confused. It makes you human. Maybe you're not lacking a sense of self. Maybe you just have a more fluid sense of self than the culture knows what to do with. Maybe you understand, in a way that others don't, that we contain multitudes. That we're not one fixed thing, but a collection of possibilities. And which possibility emerges depends on the context, the moment, the need. That's not weakness. That's not something to fix. That's awareness. That's flexibility. That's being alive to the reality that we're not static objects moving through a static world, but dynamic beings in relationship with a dynamic existence. But God, it's exhausting sometimes, isn't it? Being this fluid, this responsive, this unable to just pick a lane and stay in it without constantly wondering if you should have picked a different lane, or if lanes even exist, or if you're the only one who can see that everyone is just driving on an open field, pretending there are lanes because lanes make things easier to explain. You're tired of explaining, tired of justifying why you can't just choose, why you need time, why you need to think about it, why you need to feel it out, why you can't just know immediately what everyone else seems to know immediately. You're tired of feeling like you're doing life wrong because you're doing it slowly, carefully, with attention to nuance that others have trained themselves not to see. And maybe that's okay. Maybe it's okay to be tired. Maybe it's okay to wish, sometimes, that you could be simpler. Maybe it's okay to envy the people who seem to move through life with such ease, such certainty, such lack of doubt. And maybe it's also okay to know, deep down, that you wouldn't actually want to trade places with them. Because as hard as this is, this noticing, this feeling, this constant negotiation with your own complexity, it's also real. It's authentic. It's yours. And there's something valuable in that, even if the value isn't obvious. Even if it doesn't come with rewards or recognition or anyone telling you that you're redoing it right. You're living at a depth that most people are afraid to access. You're asking questions that most people have decided not to ask. You're allowing yourself to be uncertain in a world that demands certainty, and that takes more courage than anyone gives you credit for, including yourself. There's an apology you've been writing in your head for years now. You don't even remember what it's for exactly, not the original thing anyway. It's grown since then. It's collected other moments, other mistakes, other times you said something or didn't say something or were something or in something that you've convinced yourself requires apologizing for. It's become less of an apology and more of a confession, maybe? A catalog of all the ways you've failed to be the person you think you should have been. The person who would have handled that situation better. Who would have known the right thing to say? Who would have been less awkward, less sensitive, less much? You rehearse it sometimes, not out loud, but in your mind when you're driving or showering or lying awake at 3 a.m. You go through it, revising, adding new sections, trying to find the exact words that would make the other person understand that you know you got it wrong, that you've always known, that you've been carrying their hurt along with your own, and you're sorry. You're so sorry for putting it there in the first place, but you never send it. Never say it out loud, because saying it out loud would require bringing up something that the other person might have forgotten about entirely. Something that might have been a small moment for them. A Tuesday afternoon that blended into every other Tuesday afternoon, but for you has become this landmark event that you return to over and over, excavating it for meaning, for lessons, for proof of your fundamental inadequacy. And you can't tell if that's you being considerate or you being a coward. Maybe it's both. Maybe consideration and cowardice look the same sometimes. Maybe the line between protecting someone else as peace and protecting yourself from vulnerability is thinner than you'd like to admit. The thing is, you've noticed that other people don't seem to do this. They make mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes, but then they just move on. They apologize in the moment, or they don't, and then they continue with their lives as if the mistake was just one moment among thousands of moments, not this defining referendum on their character. But you can't do that. Your mistakes follow you. They tap you on the shoulder at random times. They show up in dreams wearing slightly different faces. They wait until you're almost happy, and then they whisper, "Remember that time? Remember how you failed?" And you do remember. You remember in detail that no one asked you to maintain. You remember the exact expression on their face, the weather that day, what you were wearing, the specific words you used that you wish you could unsay, the silence afterward that seemed to contain entire conversations you weren't equipped to have. You remember all of it, and you've apologized for it 1,000 times in your head to people who have probably stopped thinking about you entirely. People who have moved on with their lives, who have actual problems to deal with, who are not lying awake at night replaying a conversation from 2017. But you are. You're still there, in 2017, trying to say it differently, trying to be different, trying to reach back through time and shake yourself and say, "Not that way. Say it this way instead. Be better. Be smarter. Be the person who doesn't leave these scars on other people." And it's not helping, is it? All this rehearsing, all this reviewing, all this careful analysis of everything you did wrong and could have done better. It's not actually making you better. It's just making you tired. It's making you scared to say anything at all, because every word you say now carries the weight of every word you wish you hadn't said before. Every conversation is overlaid with the ghost of conversations you ruined. Every connection is haunted by connections you failed at. And you're trying so hard not to fail again. So hard that you've become careful to the point of paralysis. So careful that you triple-check every text before sending it. So careful that you rehearse casual conversations in your mind before having them. So careful that you started to opt out of interactions entirely because the risk of getting it wrong feels greater than the potential reward of getting it right. And that's not living, is it? That's not connection. That's not vulnerability. That's not any of the things you actually want. That's just self-protection that's become self-imprisonment. You've locked yourself in a cell made of old mistakes, and you're rattling the bars, apologizing to guards who aren't even there anymore. But here's what you haven't considered. What if those people you hurt, if you actually hurt them, which maybe you didn't hurt them as badly as you think you did, What if they've forgiven you already? What if they forgave you years ago, or days ago, or instantly, because they understood that you were human, and humans mess up, and that's just part of the deal of knowing other humans? What if the only person who hasn't forgiven you is you? What if you've been holding yourself to a standard that literally no one else is holding you to? What if you've been punishing yourself for crimes that were either misdemeanors at worst or completely imaginary at best? What if your memory of these events is distorted by your anxiety about them? What if you've replayed them so many times that the replays have become more real than the original moments? And now you're apologizing for things that didn't even happen the way you remember them happening? That's possible, you know. Memory isn't a recording. It's a reconstruction. And every time you reconstruct it, you change it slightly. You add your current feelings, your current fears, your current understanding of yourself as someone who gets things wrong. And over time, those additions become part of the memory itself until you can separate what actually happened from what you re-afraid might have happened, or what you've convinced yourself must have happened, because why else would you feel so bad about it? But feeling bad about something doesn't mean it was actually bad. Sometimes we feel bad about things because we're trained to feel bad, because we learned early that mistakes were unforgivable, that imperfection was dangerous, that if we weren't careful, if we weren't perfect, we'd lose the love that was always conditional anyway. And maybe that's what this apology really is. Not an apology to the people you think you wronged, but an apology to the version of yourself who learned that your worth was contingent on never making mistakes. The version who learned that love had to be earned through flawlessness. The version who's still waiting for permission to be human. That version needs to hear something. Not an apology, but maybe an acknowledgement? An acknowledgement that you did your best with what you knew at the time. That you were younger, or more scared, or less equipped, or just different than you are now. That you're allowed to have been that person then, without being that person forever. That growth doesn't require you to hate who you were before. That you can look back with compassion instead of contempt. That you can say, I would handle that differently now, without adding, and I am a terrible person for not handling it differently then. You can release yourself from the obligation of perfecting the past. You can let those old versions of you rest. You can let them be imperfect and young and trying their best and still worthy of kindness. You can stop rehearsing apologies that will never be said and start practicing something else instead. Forgiveness, not for them, for you. Part 6. The room you return to. There's a room in your memory that you visit more than you'd like to admit. It's not always the same room. Sometimes it's your childhood bedroom with that particular quality of light that came through the window at 4 p.m. Sometimes it's a classroom where you said something stupid and everyone went quiet in that specific way that meant they were all thinking the same thing about you. Sometimes it's just a generic room, assembled from parts of other rooms, but the feeling in it is always the same. The feeling of not belonging. Not in a dramatic way. Not in a way anyone would notice from the outside. You were there, physically. You participated. You did the things you were supposed to do. But some part of you was always somewhere else, watching, wondering when someone would notice that you didn't quite fit. And maybe they did notice. Maybe that's why you felt that way. Because on some level, everyone could tell that you were performing belonging rather than experiencing it. That you were mimicking connection while feeling fundamentally separate. Or maybe no one noticed at all, and you were the only one who could feel the gap between your external presentation and your internal experience. Maybe everyone else was taking you at face value while you were conducting this elaborate internal audit of your own authenticity. You still don't know which one is true. Both options feel equally possible and equally terrible. Either everyone saw through you, or no one saw you at all. Either you failed at pretending, or you succeeded so well that the real you became invisible. That room, those rooms, They represent something you haven't quite found the words for. It's not just loneliness. It's something more specific. It's the loneliness of being surrounded by people. The loneliness of saying all the right things while feeling all the wrong things. The loneliness of wanting so badly to connect, but not knowing how to bridge the gap between you and everyone else. You thought it would get better as you got older. You thought you'd grow into yourself, or into the world, or the world would shift to accommodate you, and eventually you'd find your people and your place, and that feeling would go away. And in some ways, it has gotten better. You've found people who understand parts of you. You've had moments of real connection. You've built a life that looks, from the outside, like someone who figured things out, but that room is still there. You still return to it, especially when you're tired or stressed, or when you've spent too much time around people and need to remember who you are when no one is watching. You slip back into that feeling of separateness, of watching life through glass, of being present, but not quite participating in the way everyone else seems to participate. And you hate that you still feel this way. You hate that after all these years, after all the work you've done on yourself, after all the therapy and self-help books and honest conversations, you can still be transported back to that room by the smallest things. A certain tone in someone's voice, a moment of silence in a group conversation, the feeling of being the only one who doesn't get the joke. Shouldn't you be past this by now? Shouldn't you have healed this part of yourself? Shouldn't you have integrated your trauma and processed your feelings and emerged as someone who feels comfortable in their own skin, in any room, with any group of people? That's what all the articles promise, isn't it? That healing is a destination you reach. That if you do the work, you'll arrive at a place where you no longer feel these old familiar pains, where the past stays in the past, where triggers lose their power and old wounds stop reopening. But that's not how it works for you. For you, healing looks different. It looks less like arrival and more like familiarity. Like learning to recognize that room when you find yourself back in it. Like being able to say, "Oh, I know this feeling," without panicking that you're broken because you're feeling it again. Because here's what no one tells you about healing. It's not linear. It's not permanent. It's not a state you achieve and then maintain forever. It's more like a skill you build, a muscle you strengthen, a practice you return to over and over, each time with slightly more grace than the last time. You don't stop having the feelings. You don't stop visiting that room. You just get better at not believing everything the room tells you about yourself. The room says, "You don't belong here. You never did." Everyone can tell. And instead of accepting that as truth, you can recognize it as a story. A story that made sense when you were younger, when you had less evidence to contradict it. A story that protected you once, maybe, by lowering your expectations so you couldn't be disappointed. But it's just a story. The actual truth is more complicated. The actual truth is that sometimes you do belong, and sometimes you do ain't, and most of the time it is somewhere in between. And none of that means anything definitive about your worth or your lovability or your right to exist in spaces with other people. Sometimes rooms are just uncomfortable. Sometimes groups are just not your group. Sometimes connection is hard, not because you're re-broken, but because connection is genuinely one of the hardest things humans do, and everyone's faking it a little bit, and the only difference between you and them is that you're aware you're faking it. That awareness is both your curse and your gift. It makes everything harder because you can't unsee it. You can't just relax into belonging the way people who don't question belonging can. You're always slightly conscious of yourself, slightly aware of the performance, slightly uncertain whether what you're feeling is what you're supposed to be feeling. But it also makes you kinder, doesn't it? It makes you more attuned to other people's discomfort, more likely to notice when someone else is standing at the edge of the room, feeling what you feel, more willing to reach out, to include, to make space for people who might not feel like they belong. Because you know what it's like to be them. You know what it's like to need someone to notice, To need someone to say, without saying it directly, I see you. You're not as invisible as you think you are. You're not as separate as you feel. And maybe that's why you still visit that room. Not because you're broken or stuck or failing at healing, but because that room taught you something important. It taught you empathy. It taught you attention. It taught you how to be gentle with people who are trying their best to look like they refine. That room made you who you are. And who you are is someone who feels things deeply, who notices things others miss, who carries old pain not as a wound, but as a kind of wisdom, who understands that belonging is complex and connection is hard, and we all just doing our best with what we've got. You don't need to stop visiting that room. You just need to remember that you don't live there anymore. You can visit. You can acknowledge it. You can even, in some strange way, be grateful for what it taught you. And then you can leave. You can return to the room you're in now, the life you're living now, the person you are now, who is not that child who didn't know how to belong, but an adult who has learned slowly and imperfectly that belonging isn't something you find. It's something you practice. You've become fluent in a language that has no words, the language of knowing when to stop talking, when to let a silence sit, when to not fill the space with explanations or jokes or apologies designed to make everyone comfortable again. Most people don't speak this language. Most people panic in silence. They rush to fill it with sound, any sound, because silence feels like something's wrong, like someone needs to fix something, like the conversation is broken and needs to be repaired immediately. But you've learned that silence isn't always broken. Sometimes silence is just what comes after something true has been said. Sometimes it's the space where people digest what they've heard. Sometimes it's the pause before someone decides whether they're brave enough to say what they're actually thinking. And you've learned to wait in that space. Not because you're comfortable there. You're not always, but because you've noticed that the most honest things tend to emerge from silence. That if you can tolerate the discomfort of not speaking, someone else might use that space to say something real. And real is what you're always looking for, isn't it? Not real in a confrontational way. Not real as in forcing people to bare their souls when they'd rather keep their shirts on. But real in the sense of actual, true, unperformed, the thing underneath the thing people say first. You can feel the difference. You can feel when someone's saying what they think they should say versus what they actually mean. You can feel the weight of unspoken things hovering in the air between sentences. You can feel when a conversation is skating on the surface versus diving below it. And you want the below. You've always wanted the below, even when you were young and couldn't articulate why small talk felt so exhausting. Why parties where everyone was having fun left you feeling more alone than actually being alone. Why you'd rather have one real conversation with one person than 100 pleasant exchanges with 100 pleasant people who never said anything that cost them anything to say. But wanting the below comes with a cost. The cost is that you can't tolerate the above anymore. You can't participate in conversations about nothing with the enthusiasm that's expected. You can't pretend to care about things you don't care about. You can't perform interest in topics that everyone's supposed to find interesting, but that feel, to you, like elaborate ways of avoiding saying anything that matters. And that makes you difficult sometimes. Not difficult in a mean way, but difficult in the sense that people can't quite figure you out. They'll be talking about something, the weather, the weekend, the thing everyone saw on TV, and you'll be nodding, participating, but they can feel that you're somewhere else. That you're waiting for the conversation to go somewhere it might not go. And some people find that intimidating. They think you're judging them. Judging their choice to talk about surface things. Judging their inability or unwillingness to go deeper. And maybe you are judging a little, even though you don't mean to. Even though you know that not every conversation needs to be deep. That sometimes people are just tired and small talk is how they rest. But you can't help it. You can't help wanting more. You can't help feeling disappointed when conversations stay shallow. You can't help feeling like you're wasting time, wasting words, wasting the precious few moments you have with another human being on exchanging information that neither of you will remember tomorrow. And so, you've learned to create silence. Not awkward silence, though it probably feels awkward to others sometimes, but purposeful silence, strategic silence. Silence that invites depth by refusing to accept surface. You do this without thinking about it now. Someone says something casual, something designed to keep the conversation light, and instead of returning another light thing, you pause. You consider. You respond with something slightly more honest, slightly more vulnerable, slightly more real. And one of two things happens. Either they meet you there, they feel the invitation, and they take it. And suddenly, you having a completely different conversation than the one you started with. Or they don't. They deflect. They laugh. They change the subject. They give you the signal that says, not today, not with you, not going there. And you respect that. You don't push. You don't insist. You don't make people go deeper than they want to go. You've learned that forced vulnerability isn't vulnerability at all. It's just another kind of violence. But it still hurts a little, doesn't it? Every time someone chooses the surface. Every time you extend an invitation to real, and they politely decline. Every time you remember that most people are just trying to get through their day without feeling too much, and you're over here trying to feel everything. You're always trying to feel everything, even when it hurts. Even when it would be easier to skim along the surface, like everyone else seems capable of doing. Even when you wish, desperately sometimes, that you could just have a normal conversation about normal things without this constant hunger for something more. But you can't turn it off. This need for depth, this allergy to pretense, this inability to participate in social rituals that everyone else seems to find perfectly satisfying. And you've spent a lot of time thinking something was wrong with you because of this. You've spent a lot of time trying to be lighter, trying to care less, trying to be the kind of person who can go to a party and just enjoy the party without analyzing why everyone is performing enjoyment instead of actually experiencing it. But that's not who you are. You're someone who feels the undercurrents, who hears what's not being said, who can't be satisfied with the official version of any story, because you can always sense there's another version underneath. And that's lonely sometimes. It's lonely being the person who wants to talk about the thing no one wants to talk about, who wants to acknowledge the feeling in the room that everyone's pretending not to feel, who wants to say, I think we all sad about this, when everyone else has agreed to be happy about it. But it's also honest. It's also real. It's also the most authentic way you know how to be in the world. And increasingly, you're learning to value that over being comfortable, over being liked, over being the person who makes things easy for everyone else. Because here's what you've figured out. The people who can meet you in the deep, those are your people. Those are the ones worth spending time with. Those are the relationships that actually sustain you instead of draining you. Everyone else, they're fine. They're nice. They're perfectly good humans living perfectly good lives. But they're not for you. And you're not for them. And that's okay. You don't have to be for everyone. You don't have to make yourself smaller or lighter or more palatable. You don't have to apologize for wanting conversations that matter. You don't have to pretend that small talk satisfies you when it doesn't. You can just be who you are. The person who speaks in silence, who listens for what's underneath, who creates space for real things to emerge, even when it makes people uncomfortable. That's not wrong. That's not too much. That's just you, speaking your native language in a world that mostly speaks something else. And the right people, they'll understand what you're saying. Even when you're not saying anything at all, there's a version of you that exists only in your own company. A version that no one else gets to meet. Not because you're hiding it exactly, but because it only emerges when there are no witnesses. when there's no one to perform for, when you can finally stop translating yourself into something others can understand. This version of you is strange. Not strange in a bad way, just strange in the sense of unfamiliar, different, more itself than the versions of you that have to exist in shared spaces. This version talks to itself out loud, not in full conversations. You're not that far gone, but in fragments, half sentences, questions asked to no one, observations made for an audience of one. This version sings badly in the car and doesn't care, dances in the kitchen while cooking, makes faces in the mirror, laughs at jokes no one else would find funny because the humor is too specific, too internal, too dependent on a web of private references that only make sense to you. This version is weirder than any version you'd allow in public. More dramatic, too. This version feels things at full volume, cries during commercials, gets genuinely moved by a particularly beautiful sentence in a book, has full emotional responses to things that the public versions of you have learned to nod at politely. This version has opinions that would make your friends surprised. Not controversial opinions necessarily, just specific ones, particular ones. Opinions about things no one thinks to have opinions about how doors should sound when they close, about which kind of light is best for different times of day, about the correct way to arrange items on a shelf, or fold a towel, or organize a thought. This version has rituals, small ones that would seem silly if you had to explain them. The way you have to touch certain things in a certain order before leaving the house, the route you take through rooms, the specific way you make coffee or tea, or whatever you make that's exactly right, and any deviation from the process produces something that tastes different, even though, objectively, it's the same. This version thinks things you'd never say out loud. Not bad things, just true things. Observations about people you know, thoughts about situations you're in, feelings about relationships that don't match the feelings you're supposed to have, questions about your own life that would sound like you're ungrateful or struggling if you voiced them, but really, you're just wondering, just noticing, just being honest with yourself in a way you can't be with others. This version of you is the most you've ever been, and it only exists in private, in the space between obligations, in the hours when no one needs anything from you, and you don't need to be anything for anyone. And you protect these hours, don't you? Maybe more than you protect anything else. You protect your alone time like it's sacred, because in a way, it is. It's the only time you get to be complete. The only time you don't have to edit yourself, or explain yourself, or justify yourself. The only time you can just be. And people don't understand this about you. They think you're antisocial when you decline invitations. They think you're depressed when you want to stay home. They think something's wrong when you need space, need silence, need time to yourself. It isn't about recovering from other people, but about reconnecting with yourself. But nothing's wrong. You just need this time, this space, this version of you that no one else meets. You need it the way other people need connection, the way they need to be around others, the way they need noise and activity and social interaction to feel alive. You need the opposite. You need quiet. You need solitude. You need long stretches of unstructured time where you can let your mind wherever it wants to wander without having to steer it toward topics that make sense to anyone but you. And you used to feel guilty about this. You used to think there was something wrong with you for needing so much alone time, for being an introvert in a world designed for extroverts, for finding social interaction exhausting when you're supposed to find it energizing. You used to force yourself to be more social than you wanted to be, to say yes to things you wanted to say no to spend time with people when what you really wanted was to spend time with yourself, and you'd come home depleted, completely empty, like you'd given away parts of yourself that you needed to function, and now you had to spend hours or days recovering them. But you don't do that anymore, or at least you do it less. You're learning to honor this need, to stop apologizing for it, to stop treating your private self like a secret you should be ashamed of. Because this version of you, this strange, private, fully yourself version, this is not a lesser version. This is not the version you become when you read too tired to be social, or too anxious to perform, or too depressed to maintain the public persona. This is just you, actual you. The you that exists independent of other people's perceptions and expectations and needs. And this version deserves time, deserves space, deserves to exist without justification. You don't have to earn your alone time by being social enough first. You don't have to justify needing it by explaining how hard your week was or how many people you've been around. You don't have to apologize for wanting to be by yourself. You can just want it, and that's enough. Because here's the thing people don't tell you about needing alone time. It's not about disliking people. It's not about being antisocial or broken or damaged. It's not even about being introverted, necessarily, though that's part of it. It's about having an internal life that's rich enough to sustain you. An internal world that's interesting enough to inhabit. An internal dialogue that's engaging enough to be worth having. And you have that. You've always had that. Even when you were young and could not explain why you'd rather read in your room than play with the neighbor kids. Even when you felt guilty for preferring your own company to company. Even when everyone told you that something was wrong with you for not needing people the way people are supposed to need people. Nothing was wrong with you. You just had a rich inner life. You still do. And that inner life needs tending. It needs time and space and attention. It needs hours when it can unfold without interruption. When it can explore whatever it wants to explore without having to check if anyone else finds it interesting. And the version of you that lives in that inner life, the strange, private, fully yourself version, that version is not separate from your real self. That version is your real self. All the other versions, the social version, the professional version, the version that knows how to make small talk and laugh at appropriate times and be what others need you to be, those are translations. Necessary translations, maybe. Useful translations. But translations nonetheless. And you can't live in translation all the time. You need time in your native language. Time in your original form. Time when you don't have to translate anything for anyone. And that's what your alone time is. It's not isolation. It's not avoidance. It's not hiding from the world. It's returning to yourself. It's remembering who you are when no one's watching. It's letting the version of you that no one else meets have the time and space it needs to exist. And that's not selfish. That's not wrong. That's just being human in the particular way you're human. And you're allowed to be that. There's something you haven't forgiven yourself for. Maybe it's big. Maybe it's small. Maybe it's something you did or something you didn't do, or something you were or something you failed to be. Maybe it happened yesterday or 10 years ago, or so long ago that the details have blurred, but the feeling remains sharp. Whatever it is, you carry it. Not consciously, not always. But it's there, in the background, like a sound you've gotten so used to that you only notice it in the quiet moments. When you're trying to rest and can't. When you're almost happy and something pulls you back. When someone compliments you and you can't quite accept it because this thing you haven't forgiven yourself for is still there, still whispering. But you don't deserve that, and you've tried to forgive yourself. You've said the words. You've done the exercises. You've written letters to yourself. You've tried to give yourself the compassion you'd give anyone else. You've tried to apply logic. If a friend told you they'd done this thing, you'd tell them they're being too hard on themselves, that everyone makes mistakes, that they're allowed to be human. But it doesn't work when you apply it to yourself, because you know things about yourself that you don't know about your friends. You know your motivations. You know what you were thinking at the time. You know whether it was truly an accident, or whether some part of you chose it, wanted it, allowed it to happen. And that knowledge makes forgiveness feel impossible. Because how do you forgive yourself when you know yourself too well? When you can't give yourself the benefit of the doubt, because there is no doubt, you were there, you know exactly what happened, and knowing makes it worse somehow. Other people get to not know. They get to believe your explanations. They get to accept that you did your best. They get to see only the outcome, not the entire decision tree of moments where you could have chosen differently but didn't. But you don't get that mercy. You don't get to not know. And so you hold yourself accountable in ways that go far beyond justice and into punishment, into penance that never ends, because you've never defined what would be enough. How many years of guilt would balance the scales? How much shame would pay the debt? How long do you have to carry this before you've earned the right to put it down? You don't know. You've never let yourself know, because part of you believes that forgiveness would mean it didn't matter, that letting yourself off the hook would mean you're saying what you did was okay, that moving on would be a betrayal of the person you hurt, or could have hurt, or imagine you might have hurt. So you stay here, in this place of unforgiveness, this place where you get to be good by being punitive toward yourself, where you get to demonstrate your morality by refusing yourself the compassion you de-extend to literally anyone else. And it's exhausting, isn't it? Carrying this, maintaining it, feeding it with every new mistake you make, every new proof that you're still that person who did that thing, that you haven't changed as much as you'd like to believe you have. But here's what's actually happening. You're not holding yourself accountable. You're holding yourself hostage. Accountability has an end point. Accountability says, I did this thing. It was wrong. Here's what I've learned. Here's what I'll do differently. Accountability is educational. It's productive. It moves you forward. What you're doing isn't accountability. It's self-flagellation. It's punishment for punishment's sake. It's maintaining pain because you believe you deserve pain. And if you're not the one inflicting it, then who will be? And maybe that's the real fear, isn't it? That if you forgive yourself, if you let this go, nothing will stop you from doing it again. That your guilt is the only thing keeping you good. That your shame is the only thing preventing you from being worse than you are. But that's not true. You know that's not true, because you've changed. You've grown. You've learned. You wouldn't do the thing now that you did then, not because you're still punishing yourself for it, but because you're different than you were. The punishment isn't what changed you. The learning changed you. The awareness changed you. The genuine regret and the actual understanding of how your actions affected others that changed you. The guilt is just left over. It's just the price you've decided you have to keep paying, even though the debt, if there ever was one, has been paid. Even though you're holding yourself to a standard that no reasonable person would hold you to. And you know what? Maybe you did do something wrong. Maybe it wasn't a misunderstanding or a mistake or a situation where you did your best. Maybe you genuinely messed up. Maybe you hurt someone. Maybe you were selfish or careless or cruel in a moment when you could have been better. That's allowed too. You're allowed to have done something wrong and still deserve forgiveness. You're allowed to have been less than perfect and still be worthy of moving on. You're allowed to have hurt people and still be a good person who made a bad choice, rather than a bad person whose goodness is forever questionable. Because here's the thing about being human. We're not good or bad. We're both. We're everything. We're capable of profound kindness and spectacular selfishness, often in the same day. We're capable of hurting people we love, of failing people we meant to help, of making choices that harm others even when we didn't mean to cause harm. And we're also capable of learning, of growing, of becoming better than we were, of making amends where we can and living differently where we can't. That's what you've been doing, even while refusing to forgive yourself for not doing it sooner. You've been becoming someone different, someone who wouldn't make that same mistake, someone who's learned from that pain and used it to be more careful, more conscious, more aware of how your actions ripple outward. You've done the work. You've changed. You've grown. The only thing you haven't done is release yourself from the prison you've been living in. And you can do that now. Not because what you did doesn't matter. Not because it didn't hurt, or wasn't wrong, or isn't worth remembering. But because holding on to it isn't helping anyone. It's not helping the person you hurt. They've moved on, probably. Or they haven't. But either way, your continued self-punishment isn't healing them. It's not helping the world. You're not a better person for carrying this guilt. You're just a more burdened person. It's not even helping you. It's just making you smaller, more scared, more hesitant to fully participate in your own life. So what would happen if you forgave yourself? Not immediately. Not all at once. But slowly, gradually. What if you started treating yourself the way you treat someone you loved, who came to you with this same guilt, this same shame, this same story of having done something they regret? You wouldn't tell them they had to carry it forever. You wouldn't tell them their whole life should be defined by this one thing. You wouldn't tell them that growth doesn't count, that change doesn't matter, that they re-still that person who did that thing even though years have passed, and they read demonstrably different now. You'd tell them it's time. Time to put it down. Time to let it rest. Time to take what they've learned and leave the rest behind. So maybe that's what you need to hear too. It's time. You've carried this long enough. You've learned what there was to learn. You've paid whatever price needs to be paid. You've become someone different through the process of holding this pain. Now it's time to put it down. Not forget, not dismiss. Not pretend it didn't happen or didn't matter. Just release. Let it be something that happened to a younger version of you. Let it be something you learned from. Let it be part of your story without being the entirety of your story. Let yourself be forgiven. By yourself. For yourself. Despite yourself. Let yourself be human. Flawed. Imperfect. Still learning. Still growing. Still worthy of compassion, especially your own. Let yourself rest from this. Not because you've earned it, but because earning has nothing to do with it. Because forgiveness isn't something you earn. It's something you choose. It's something you give, especially to yourself. And you can choose it now. Right now, in this moment, wherever you are, however you're feeling, whatever you've done or failed to do, you can choose to start the process of forgiving yourself. Not because it's easy, not because it's logical, not because you're sure you deserve it, but because you're tired of not forgiving yourself. And tired is a good enough reason. Tired is permission. Tired means it's time to rest. Even from this. Especially from this. You're still here. After everything. After all the nights you weren't sure you'd get through. After all the days that felt like moving through water, after all the moments when it seemed easier to stop than to keep going, you still here. That's not nothing. You might think it is. You might think that just continuing to exist isn't an accomplishment. That breathing and waking up and moving through days doesn't count as achievement because you didn't have a choice. You had to do it. It's just what happens when you don't die. But it's more than that. You've been choosing, even when it didn't feel like choosing. You've been showing up, even when showing up took everything you had, and then some. You've been holding yourself together, or holding yourself loosely, or just holding yourself. However you've been doing it, you've been doing it. And that matters. It matters that you're reading this right now, that you made it to this moment, that you're still curious enough about your own experience to be here, paying attention, listening to words about things you've felt, but maybe never heard named. It matters that you keep going even when going is hard, even when you're not sure where you're going or why, even when the path feels unclear and the destination seems impossible, and the whole endeavor of being alive feels like a question. UK answer. You keep going anyway. Not because you're strong, though you are, even if you don't feel strong. Not because you're brave, though you are, even if you don't feel brave, but because somewhere inside you, beneath all the exhaustion and the doubt and the accumulated weight of everything you carry, there's still a small light. It's not bright. It's not steady. Some days you can barely see it at all. But it's there. It's the part of you that still wants things. Even small things. The part that still feels things. Even hard things. The part that still hopes things. Even impossible things. It's the part that made you pause when you saw something beautiful, even though you were too tired to care about beauty. The part that laughed, even briefly, even at something stupid, even in the middle of a day when laughing felt wrong. It's the part that reached out to someone, even when reaching out felt pointless. The part that tried something new, even when new felt dangerous. A part that kept a plant alive or a pet alive or yourself alive, even when alive felt like too much work. That light, it's been there all along, through everything, through the worst of it, through the times when you were sure you'd lost yourself completely, when you couldn't remember who you were before all this weight, when you thought you'd never feel like yourself again. It was there, smaller sometimes, almost invisible, but never quite extinguished. And you don't have to make that light bigger. You don't have to turn it into something bright and obvious and proudly displayed. You don't have to become some version of yourself that's healed and whole and radiantly positive. You just have to let it be there. Let it be small. Let it flicker. Let it be the size it is, which is exactly the size it needs to be to get you through today. Because that's all you need, really. Not a blazing fire of motivation. Not a burning passion that lights up everything around you. Just enough light to see the next step. Just enough warmth to keep going a little longer. And you have that. You've always had that, even when you thought you'd lost it. Even when you couldn't see it because you were looking for something bigger, something brighter, something that looked like the kind of light other people seem to have. But this light, your light, it doesn't have to look like anyone else's. It can be quiet. It can be private. It can be the kind of light that only you can see, that only matters to you, that doesn't inspire anyone else or change anyone else's life. It can just be yours. The small, persistent, stubborn refusal to completely give up. The tiny voice that still says maybe when everything else says no. The faint warmth that remains even after everything else has gone cold. That's enough. You're enough. Not the you that you think you should be. Not the you that you're working toward becoming. Not the you that exists in your imagination. The one who has it all figured out and isn't carrying all this weight. The you that's here right now. The you that's tired and uncertain and still learning how to be. The you that's doing your best, even when your best doesn't look like you thought it would. That you, this you, is enough. And maybe someday you'll believe that. Maybe someday you LL read these words, or words like them, and you LL feel them land in a place that S ready to receive them. Maybe someday you'll look back at this version of yourself and feel something like compassion, something like understanding, something like love. But even if that day never comes, even if you never fully believe you're enough, even if you carry this doubt and this weight for the rest of your life, you'll still be enough. Because enough isn't a feeling. It's not a state you achieve. It's not something you have to earn or prove or convince yourself of. It's just what you are, by virtue of being here, by virtue of existing, by virtue of that small light inside you that keeps flickering, keeps trying, keeps you breathing through another moment, another hour, another day. You're here. And that's enough. That's always been enough. Even when it doesn't feel like it. Even when you're sure it isn't. Even now. Especially now. Gentle silence. The kind that doesn't need to be filled. The kind that allows you to stay exactly as you are, in whatever room you're in, feeling whatever you're feeling, being whoever you are right now. The kind of silence that doesn't ask anything of you. That just is, like you, like this moment. like the quiet space between one breath and the next, where nothing needs to be different and you don't need to be anything other than exactly this. There's a specific quality to thoughts that arrive at 3 a.m. They're different from daytime thoughts. Sharper somehow. More honest. Less filtered by the mechanisms you use during waking hours to keep yourself functional, appropriate, moving forward. At 3 a.m., those mechanisms are asleep, and you're awake with the raw version of your own mind. The version that asks questions you've learned not to ask in daylight. The version that remembers things you've trained yourself to forget. The version that feels things you've agreed to pretend you don't feel. This is when you have your realist conversations with yourself. Not the productive ones, not the problem-solving ones. Not the conversations where you make lists or plans or decisions about how you're going to do better tomorrow. These are the other conversations, the ones that go nowhere, the ones that circle and spiral and revisit the same territories over and over without ever arriving at conclusions. You talk to yourself about people you've lost touch with, not because you missed them exactly, but because you never understood what happened. How you went from talking every day to not talking at all. How closeness turned into distance without any dramatic event, just a gradual fading that no one ever acknowledged. And you wonder if they think about you too, if they have their own 3 a.m. conversations where your name comes up, if they remember the same moments you remember, if they've assigned the same meaning to your silence that you've assigned to theirs. Probably not. Probably they moved on completely. Probably you matter less to them than they matter to you, and that asymmetry is something you can't quite accept, even though you know it is how most relationships work. You talk to yourself about decisions you made years ago, doors you walked through or didn't walk through, paths you took or didn't take. And you play this game where you try to imagine what your life would look like now if you'd chosen differently. Would you be happier? More successful? More yourself? Or would you just be having different 3 a.m. conversations about different regrets? You can't know. That's the torture of it. You can't run the experiment. You can't split yourself into parallel versions and compare results. You only get one life, one set of choices, one path through the infinite garden of forking possibilities. And you chose this one? Or this one chose you? Or some combination of both that you'll never fully understand. You talk to yourself about the person you thought you'd be by now. When you were younger, you had ideas. Not specific plans necessarily, but a general sense of trajectory, a feeling about who you'd become, what your life would look like, how you'd feel moving through it. And now you're here, in whatever version of here constitutes your current life. And it's not what you expected. It's not worse exactly. Not better exactly. Just different. Just sideways from what you imagined in a way that makes it hard to evaluate. Are you disappointed? Are you relieved? Are you still waiting for your real life to start? Or have you been living it this whole time without realizing? At 3 a.m., these questions feel urgent, critical. Like if you could just figure them out, everything else would make sense. But by morning, they'll fade again. They'll lose their urgency. They'll get filed away with all the other 3 a.m. thoughts that feel important in darkness, but embarrassing in light. You talk to yourself about loneliness, not the simple kind. Not the kind that gets solved by calling a friend, or going to a party, or downloading a dating app. The other kind. The kind that exists even when you're surrounded by people. The kind that's about being fundamentally unknown, rather than being physically alone. You wonder if anyone really knows you. If anyone sees past the version of yourself you present. If anyone would recognize you if they encountered you in one of these 3 a.m. states, with all your defenses down, all your carefully constructed persona dissolved. Probably not. Probably you've been too successful at seeming fine. At seeming like you have it together. At seeming like someone who doesn't have long, winding conversations with themselves in the middle of the night. And whose fault is that? Yours for hiding? Theirs for not looking closer, everyone's, no one's. You talk to yourself about meaning, about whether your life has it, about whether anything has it, about whether meaning is something you find, or something you make, or something you give up looking for once you realize the search itself is the problem. You think about all the things you do, day after day, the routines, the obligations, the small tasks that fill time, and you wonder what it's all for, what you're building toward, what the point is, and you don't arrive at answers. You never arrive at answers during these conversations. That's not what they're for. They're for something else, something harder to name. Maybe they're for witnessing yourself, for being the person who pays attention to your own experience, even when that experience is uncomfortable, even when it would be easier to take something that would let you sleep, to scroll something that would distract you, to do anything other than lie there in the dark, having these impossible conversations with the only person who never leaves. Maybe they're for honesty, for letting yourself think thoughts you wouldn't say out loud, for feeling feelings you've learned to minimize, for being exactly as lost or scared or uncertain as you actually are, without immediately rushing to fix it or solve it or make it smaller. Maybe they're for connection, not with anyone else, but with yourself, with the parts of yourself that only come out at night, the parts that don't fit into daylight hours, the parts that need space and darkness and silence to exist at all. You've learned some things from these conversations, haven't you? Even though they never conclude, even though they never produce actionable insights or practical solutions, even though you always end them the same way, by eventually falling asleep or getting up to pee or checking your phone, or just lying there until the thoughts finally exhaust themselves and fade into the particular emptiness that comes before dawn. You've learned that you're more complicated than you let on, that you contain more doubt, more questions, more unresolved feelings than anyone in your life probably suspects, that the confident, capable version of yourself that moves through the world is real, but it's not complete. It's not the whole story. You've learned that everyone probably has these conversations, that the difference between you and people who seem more settled, more certain, more at peace isn't that they've figured something out that you haven't. It's just that they're better at not thinking about it, or they have different 3 a.m. thoughts, or they take melatonin. You've learned that these conversations don't mean something's wrong with you. They're not evidence of depression or anxiety or existential crisis, though they might contain elements of all three. They're just what happens when a conscious being has enough quiet to hear themselves think, and enough honesty to not immediately suppress what they hear. You've learned that you don't have to solve yourself, that these middle-of-the-night versions of yourself don't need to be reconciled with the daytime versions, that you can be multiple things, that you can be functional and falling apart, that you can be fine and not fine, that you can be living your life successfully by external measures while internally having no idea what you're redoing. And you've learned something else too, though you might not have words for it yet. These conversations are a kind of prayer, not to anything external, not to God or the universe or any force outside yourself, but to something internal, something that's listening even when you're not sure what it is, something that receives these thoughts, these feelings, these questions that have no answers. You're praying to your own depth, to your own capacity to hold complexity, to your own resilience in the face of uncertainty. You're saying, I'm still here. I'm still thinking. I'm still feeling. I'm still trying to make sense of this. And somewhere inside you, something hears that. Something witnesses it. Something says back, I know. Me too. Keep going. That's what these conversations are really for. Not to solve anything. Not to conclude anything. Not to arrive anywhere. Just to remind yourself that you're here. That you're alive. That you're still engaged with your own experience. Even when that experience is uncomfortable, confusing, painful, strange. You're still here. But you can't. And you wouldn't, really, even if you could. because this sadness is connected to everything else you feel, to your joy, your wonder, your capacity for love. You can't numb the sadness without numbing everything else. You can't close yourself off to grief without closing yourself off to beauty. So you stay open, you stay feeling. You carry this nameless grief alongside everything else. And maybe that's the bravest thing you do, not the big, obvious brave things, but this quiet courage of staying open to sadness, of allowing yourself to feel what you feel, even when it doesn't make sense, even when you can't explain it, even when no one else seems to feel it the same way. You feel it anyway. And somewhere in that feeling, in that willingness to feel, is something almost like grace, the grace of being fully alive, fully present, fully yourself, sad and alive, grieving and grateful, broken and whole, all of it, at once, always. You're waiting for someone to tell you it's okay. Not okay to do something specific, not okay to make a choice or take an action, but okay in a larger sense. Okay to be who you are. Okay to want what you want. Okay to feel how you feel. Okay to take up space in the world without apologizing for it. You're waiting for permission. And you have been for a long time. Permission to rest without having earned it. Permission to say no without having a good enough reason. Permission to prioritize yourself without being selfish. Permission to be imperfect without being inadequate. Permission to stop trying so hard. Permission to want less. Permission to need more. Permission to just be, without constant self-improvement, without perpetual optimization, without turning yourself into a project that never quite gets completed. You're waiting for an authority figure who doesn't exist, someone who can officially decree that you've done enough, tried enough, sacrificed enough, and now you're allowed to exhale. You're allowed to stop performing. You're allowed to disappoint people if that's what being honest requires. But that person isn't coming. No one's going to show up and release you from the obligations you've placed on yourself. No one is going to tell you that you've suffered enough and now you get to stop suffering. No one is going to grant you permission to live your life the way you actually want to live it, instead of the way you think you're supposed to. Because the only person who can give you that permission is you. And you know this. Intellectually, you know this. You've read it in books. You've heard it in therapy. You've told other people this exact thing when they were waiting for permission they didn't need. But knowing it doesn't make it easier, because giving yourself permission feels wrong somehow. It feels selfish. It feels like breaking the rules, even though you are the one who made the rules in the first place. You've internalized so many voices over the years, so many expectations, so many standards for what makes a person good, worthy, acceptable. And now those voices live inside you, and they sound like your own voice, and you can't tell anymore which thoughts are actually yours, and which ones you've just been repeating for so long that they've become yours. The voice that says you need to be productive, that rest is laziness, that your value is determined by your output, your usefulness, your ability to serve others' needs while minimizing your own. The voice that says you need to be grateful, that wanting more is greedy, that you should be satisfied with what you have because other people have it worse, and complaining makes you ungrateful, and dissatisfaction means you're not trying hard enough to be happy. The voice that says you need to be nice, that anger is ugly, that boundaries are mean, that saying what you really think or feel might hurt someone's feelings. And hurting feelings is the worst thing you could possibly do, worse than slowly erasing yourself to keep everyone comfortable. The voice that says you need to be strong, that asking for help is weakness, that vulnerability is something to be ashamed of, that showing struggle means you're failing, and failing means you're not trying hard enough, and not trying hard enough means you deserve whatever difficulty you're experiencing. These voices are loud. They've been loud for so long, and they've convinced you that they're keeping you safe, that they're protecting you from being rejected, abandoned, criticized, revealed as the inadequate person you secretly fear you are. But they're not keeping you safe. They're keeping you small. They're keeping you trapped in a version of yourself that's designed to make everyone else comfortable. That's designed to meet everyone else's expectations. That's designed to be acceptable, appropriate, non-threatening, easy. And you're so tired of being that version. You're so tired of waiting for permission to stop being that version. So here's what I'm telling you. Even though I am just words on a screen, and you don't know me, and I have no authority over your life, you don't need permission. You never did. You're allowed to rest when you're tired. You're allowed to say no when you don't want to do something. You're allowed to have needs and express them. You're allowed to take up space. You're allowed to be complicated. You're allowed to change your mind. You're allowed to want things. You're allowed to be angry. You're allowed to be sad. You're allowed to be exactly as much as you are without making yourself less to fit into spaces that were never meant for you anyway. You're allowed to disappoint people. You're allowed to let them down. You're allowed to be the villain in someone else's story if being the hero in theirs requires you to abandon yourself. You're allowed to quit things. You're allowed to fail. You're allowed to try and then decide it's not for you. You're allowed to change directions. You're allowed to not have a 5-year plan. You're allowed to not know what you're doing. You're allowed to be imperfect. You're allowed to make mistakes. You're allowed to not have it all figured out. You're allowed to be in process, in progress, in the messy middle of becoming without having arrived. You're allowed to prioritize yourself. You're allowed to put your own oxygen mask on first. You're allowed to care about your own well-being as much as you care about others. You're allowed to be selfish sometimes. And most of the time when you think you're being selfish, you're actually just being reasonable. And you've been convinced that reasonable self-care is selfishness because someone benefits from you thinking that. You're allowed to have boundaries. You're allowed to enforce them. You're allowed to cut people off who repeatedly violate them, even if those people are family, even if they don't mean it, even if they'll be hurt. You're allowed to outgrow people. You're allowed to outgrow places. You're allowed to outgrow versions of yourself that no longer fit. You're allowed to want more than what you have. You're allowed to be dissatisfied. You're allowed to strive for better while also being grateful for what is. You're allowed to be both and instead of either or. You're allowed to contain multitudes. You're allowed to contradict yourself. You're allowed to be happy and sad, strong and fragile, confident and uncertain, all at the same time. You're allowed to be human. Messy, complicated, inconsistent, evolving, imperfect, trying human. And you don't need anyone's permission for any of it. Not mine. Not theirs. Not even your own, really, because permission implies that these things are privileges that need to be granted. But they're not privileges. They're rights. They're just the basic conditions of being a person with autonomy, agency, and dignity. You already have permission. You were born with it. You've just been taught to ask for it, to wait for it, to believe you need to earn it. But you don't. You never did. So what are you waiting for? What's the thing you've been wanting to do, wanting to say, wanting to be, but you haven't because you're waiting for someone to tell you it's okay? What if it's already okay? What if you just decided it was okay right now, and you did it anyway? What's the worst that could happen? Someone might be disappointed. Someone might think you're selfish. Someone might not like this version of you. And what's the worst that's already happening? You're disappointing yourself. You think you're being selfish toward yourself. You don't like the version of you that keeps waiting for permission that's never coming. So maybe the risk is worth it. Maybe doing the thing, being the thing, saying the thing is less dangerous than continuing to wait. Maybe the scariest thing isn't what might happen if you give yourself permission. Maybe the scariest thing is what will definitely happen if you don't. You'll keep waiting. You'll keep shrinking. You'll keep living a half-life, a careful life, a life designed around not disturbing anyone including yourself. And one day you'll be old, and you'll look back, and you'll realize you spent your whole life waiting for permission to live it. Don't do that. Please don't do that. Give yourself permission. Now. Today. Right here in this moment. Permission to be exactly who you are. Permission to want exactly what you want. Permission to live exactly the life you want to live. You don't need anyone else to grant it. You already have everything you need. You just have to claim it. There's a kind of quiet you've been searching for. Not the quiet of an empty room. Not the quiet of an absence of sound, but a different kind of quiet. An internal kind. The kind where your mind finally stops its constant commentary. Where your thoughts finally slow down. Where you finally feel like you can just be. You've been chasing this quiet your whole life, haven't you? Through meditation apps that promise peace in 10 minutes a day. Through self-help books that claim to have the answer. Through therapy, through yoga, through long walks, through every method and technique that promises to quiet the noise inside your head. And sometimes it works briefly. Sometimes you catch glimpses of it. Moments where everything aligns and you feel it. That sense of calm, of groundedness, of being okay in your own skin, in your own life, in your own mind. But then it slips away again. The noise returns. The thoughts start up. The anxiety creeps back in. And you're left chasing that feeling again, wondering what you did wrong, why you can't maintain it, why peace seems to come so easily to everyone else. But here's what no one tells you about that quiet. It's not something you achieve. It's not a destination you reach. It's not a permanent state you attain through enough practice or discipline or self-work. It's more like a place you visit, a frequency you tune into. And some days you can find it easily, and some days you can't find it at all. And that's just how it is. The quiet isn't waiting for you to become perfect enough to deserve it. It's not withholding itself until you've healed enough, or grown enough, or figured yourself out enough. It's there. It's always there, underneath everything else. Underneath the noise, the thoughts, the anxiety, the constant mental chatter. It's there the way silence is always there underneath sound. The way stillness is always there underneath movement. The way space is always there underneath all the things that fill it. You don't have to create it. You don't have to earn it. You don't have to do anything special to access it. You just have to stop. Stop trying. Stop chasing. Stop improving yourself into the ground. You just have to be willing to be here, exactly as you are, exactly as this moment is, without needing it to be different. That's all. That's the whole secret. That's what every meditation teacher and spiritual book and wise person has been trying to tell you in 1,000 different ways. Stop trying to get somewhere else. Stop trying to be someone else. Stop trying to feel something other than what you're feeling. Just be here. Just be this. Just be you. And in that moment of stopping, of surrendering, of finally giving up the fight to be different, that's when the quiet comes. Not because you did it right. Not because you finally figured it out, but because you stopped doing anything at all. You stopped resisting. You stopped pushing. You stopped trying to control your own experience. And in that space of not doing, of non-resistance, of just allowing, there it is. The quiet. The peace. The sense of being okay that you've been searching for everywhere except exactly where you are. It's here. It's always been here. You just couldn't see it because you were looking past it, looking for something more, something better, something different than this ordinary moment with its ordinary feelings and its ordinary you. But this is it. This is the quiet you've been searching for. Not somewhere else, not sometime later. Not in some improved version of yourself or your life. Right here, right now. In this imperfect moment with your imperfect self in your imperfect life. All of it, exactly as it is. Including the noise. Including the thoughts. Including whatever you're feeling that you wish you weren't feeling. The quiet doesn't require the absence of noise. It doesn't require the absence of thought or feeling. It doesn't require anything to be other than what it is. It just requires you to stop fighting it, to stop trying to change it, to stop waiting for it to be different before you allow yourself to be at peace. You can be at peace now with all of it, with yourself as you are, with your life as it is, with this moment in its strange, imperfect, unremarkable glory, not because it's perfect, but because it's real, because it's here, because it's yours, this moment, this life, this you, exactly as it is, exactly as you are. And maybe that's enough. Maybe it's always been enough. Maybe you've been enough this whole time, and the only thing you needed to do was stop trying to be more than enough, and just rest in the simple, quiet truth of being exactly this. Here, now, you. The quiet comes when you stop running from yourself, when you stop trying to fix yourself, when you stop waiting for permission to be okay. It comes when you finally allow yourself to just be. Not perfect, not healed, not finished, not done. Just here, breathing, existing, being. And in that simple, ordinary miracle of being, there's peace, there's quiet, there's everything you've been searching for. Not somewhere else, right here, in you, in this, in now. The quiet that finally comes is the quiet that's always been here, waiting for you to stop looking everywhere else and finally notice it. Notice the space between your thoughts. Notice the stillness beneath your anxiety. Notice the silence under all the noise. It's there. It's always there. And it's yours. It's always been yours. You don't have to earn it. You don't have to deserve it. You don't have to become anyone other than who you are to access it. You just have to stop, breathe, let go, and listen. Listen to the quiet that's always been underneath everything else. The quiet that's been waiting for you this whole time. It's here now. Can you hear it? That's you, the real you. The you beneath all the noise and performance and trying. The you that's always been here. The you that's never left. The you that's been waiting, patient as the earth, for you to finally come home to yourself. Welcome home. The quiet has been waiting for you. And now you're finally here. The space after the words. The breath you take. The moment you realize you're still here, still breathing, still being. The gentle recognition that maybe, just maybe, you don't have to do anything else right now. That this, exactly this, is enough. That you are enough. That rest isn't something you earn, but something you allow. And in this allowing, in this surrender, in this moment of finally letting yourself be exactly as you are, without improvement or effort or striving, there is peace. There is quiet, there is home, and you are welcome here. You have always been welcome here. There's a version of you that never grew up, not in a bad way. Not in the way people mean when they say someone's immature or needs to grow up, but in the sense that somewhere inside you, there's still a child, the child you were, the child you still are, and that child is still waiting for something. You can feel them sometimes, can't you? In certain moments, when you're scared and you want someone to tell you it's going to be okay, when you're hurt and you want someone to hold you, when you're confused and you want someone to explain how the world works, how people work, how you're supposed to navigate all of this. That child is still there, still looking for the things they didn't get enough of, still holding the feelings they weren't allowed to feel, still asking the questions that no one took the time to answer. And you've been trying to outgrow them. You've been trying to leave them behind. You've been trying to become so adult, so capable, so put together that no one, including yourself, can see that scared, confused, hurting child that still lives inside you. But they won't go away. They can't go away because they're not separate from you. They are you. They're the foundation of you. They're the core of you that existed before you learned to perform, to protect yourself, to be acceptable. That child knew things you've forgotten. They knew how to play without purpose, how to be curious without agenda, how to feel things fully without trying to manage them, how to need things without apologizing for needing them. That child also carries things you've tried to forget, the hurts that seemed too big to process, the disappointments that felt like betrayals, the moments when they realized that the adults didn't have all the answers, that the world wasn't as safe as they needed it to be. That love was more complicated and conditional than they understood. And you've been treating that child like a problem, like something to overcome, like evidence that you haven't healed enough, grown enough, matured enough. But what if they're not a problem? What if they're not something to fix or transcend or leave behind? What if that child is the part of you that still knows how to hope, how to trust, how to believe that things can be different, better, more than they are? What if that child is the part of you that still feels things authentically before you learn to edit your feelings to make them more acceptable? Before you learn to minimize your needs to make yourself more convenient? What if that child is your capacity for wonder, for joy, for connection that hasn't been completely worn down by disappointment? You've been trying to protect that child by hiding them away, by keeping them locked in some interior room where they can't get hurt anymore, where they can't embarrass you with their needs, where they can't make you vulnerable. But protection that looks like imprisonment isn't protection at all. It's just another kind of abandonment. And that child inside you, they don't need you to hide them. They need you to see them, to acknowledge them, to listen to what they're still trying to tell you. They need you to parent yourself in the ways you weren't parented, to give yourself the things you didn't get, not from others. You can't go back and change what happened or didn't happen, but from yourself. You can give yourself the understanding you didn't receive, the patience you weren't shown, the permission you weren't granted, the love that was too conditional or too absent or too complicated. You can give that to yourself now. You can give that to the child who still lives inside you, who's been waiting all this time for someone to finally see them, hear them, hold them. Not literally. You can't go back in time. You can't undo what was done or do what wasn't done. But you can attend to that child now. You can acknowledge their feelings now. You can meet their needs now in the ways that are still possible. When you feel small and scared, you can tell that child, I see you, I'm here. You're not alone. When you feel hurt, you can tell them, that was real. That mattered. Your feelings make sense. When you feel confused, you can tell them, it's okay not to understand everything. You're figuring it out. You're doing your best. You can become the parent to yourself that you needed, not to replace the parents you had. They did what they could with what they had, probably, but to supplement them, to provide what they couldn't provide. And when you do this, something shifts. Something softens. That child inside you starts to relax, starts to trust, starts to believe that maybe, finally, someone is paying attention to what they need, and that someone is you. You can do this. You can hold both versions of yourself at once, the adult you are now and the child you still are, the capable, functional person who manages life and the vulnerable, needy person who still hurts in all the old ways. You don't have to choose between them. You don't have to be only adult or only child. You can be both. You are both. And the more you acknowledge the child, the more you attend to them, the less power they have to hijack you at inconvenient moments. The less they have to scream to be heard. The less they have to create chaos to get your attention. Because they're not trying to sabotage you. They're not trying to keep you stuck. They're just trying to be seen, to be heard, to matter. And when they finally feel seen, heard, like they matter, they relax, they integrate. They become part of you instead of a separate part of you that you constantly trying to manage or escape. And you become more whole, more integrated, more yourself. Not the self you've been performing, but the self that includes everything, the adult and the child, The strong and the vulnerable, the capable and the needy, the healed and the still healing, all of it, at once, together. That's wholeness. Not perfection, not the absence of that inner child, but the integration of them, the acceptance of them, the love of them. The child you still carry isn't a burden. They're not a weakness. They're not evidence that you haven't done enough work on yourself. They're your humanity. They're your capacity to still feel, still hope, still need, still love, despite everything that's tried to close those capacities down. They're the part of you that refuses to completely harden, that refuses to become so adult, so defended, so self-sufficient that you lose access to the tender, open, vulnerable parts of being human. So stop trying to outgrow them. Stop trying to leave them behind. Stop treating them like something you need to overcome. Turn toward them instead. Listen to them. Ask them what they need. Give them what you can. Be the person for them that you needed someone to be for you. And watch what happens. Watch how you soften. How you become more compassionate with yourself. How you stop holding yourself to impossible standards. How you start allowing yourself to be human in all the messy, complicated, beautiful ways that humans are. The child you still carry is not your weakness. They're your strength. They're your heart. They're the part of you that still believes, despite everything, that love is possible. That connection is possible. That healing is possible. Don't abandon them. Don't hide them. Don't try to make them go away. Bring them with you. Hold their hand. Let them know they're safe now. Let them know you're not going anywhere. Let them know that finally, after all this time, someone is here for them. And that someone is you. You have a story about who you are. You've been telling this story for so long that you've forgotten it's a story. You think it's just the truth, just the facts, just the objective reality of who you are and how you are and why you are the way you are. But it's not. It's a story. A narrative you constructed from selective memories, interpreted events, and conclusions you drew when you were too young to know that there were other ways to interpret the same evidence. The story goes something like this. You are someone who is fundamentally fill in the blank. Too much or not enough. Too sensitive or not sensitive enough. Too needy or too independent. Too broken or too defended. Too something or not enough something. In this story, there was a moment or series of moments that proved this about you. That confirmed your essential fill-in-the-blank-ness. And everything that's happened since then has been filtered through this story, with evidence that supports it highlighted and evidence that contradicts it minimized or ignored. In this story, you are a certain way, and that way is fixed, permanent, unchangeable. It's just who you are. It's your nature. It's how you were made or how you were shaped, and there's nothing you can do about it except manage it, work around it, try to minimize its impact. And this story has been useful in its way. It's explained things. It's given you a framework for understanding yourself. It's helped you make sense of why things happen the way they happen, why you react the way you react, why life feels the way it feels. But it's also limited you, trapped you, kept you repeating patterns because that's just how you are, prevented you from trying new things because people like you don't do that, convinced you that certain possibilities are closed to you because of this essential quality that you've decided defines you. And the thing is, you're so identified with this story that challenging it feels like challenging your entire sense of self. If you're not this thing you've decided you are, then who are you? If this story isn't true, then what story is true? If you're not this fixed, knowable thing, then what are you? And that's terrifying, because humans like to know who they are. We like stable identities. We like being able to say, I'm someone who ... and have that sentence mean something solid, something reliable, something we can count on. But the truth is more complicated than that, and more liberating. The truth is that you're not one fixed thing. You never were. You're a process, not a product. You're becoming, not being. You're a collection of possibilities, not a single actuality. The story you've been telling yourself about yourself, it captured something true about you at one point. Maybe it still captures something true now, but it's not the whole truth. It's not the only truth, and it's definitely not a permanent truth. You're allowed to write a different story. You're allowed to reinterpret the evidence. You're allowed to look at the same events and draw different conclusions. You're allowed to say, maybe I'm not fundamentally broken. Maybe I was just hurt. Maybe I'm not too much. Maybe I was just around people who wanted me to be less. Maybe I'm not incapable of connection. Maybe I just haven't found my people yet. You're allowed to question the story, to examine where it came from, to ask, who told me this about myself? Was it them, or was it me? Was it true, or was it just convenient? Did it help me survive something, but now it's outlived its usefulness? You're allowed to try on different stories, to experiment with different narratives about who you are and what you're capable of, to see what happens when you act as if you were not limited in the ways you've decided you're limited. Because here's what you might discover. You're more flexible than you thought, more capable than you thought, more variable than you thought. You're not the same in every context. You're not the same with every person. You're not even the same with yourself from one day to the next. You change, you adapt, you respond to circumstances. You contain multitudes. And the story you've been telling, the one that says you're consistently, permanently, essentially one particular way, that story might have made you feel more stable, more knowable, more defined. But it also made you smaller than you are.
You are so much more than that story. You contain so much more possibility than that story allows for. You have so much more capacity than that story gives you credit for. The story said, you're someone who can't do this thing. But maybe you just haven't done it yet. Maybe you haven't had the right support, the right circumstances, the right moment. Maybe you haven't tried in the right way, or with the right people, or with the right understanding of what you actually need. The story said, you're someone who always does this thing, but maybe you just learned that pattern once and kept repeating it because it was familiar, because it felt safe, because you didn't know there were other options. Maybe you can learn new patterns. Maybe you can choose differently. The story said, this is who you are, fundamentally, essentially, permanently. But maybe there is no who you are in that fixed sense. Maybe there's only who you've been, who you are right now, and who you're becoming. And all three of those can be different things. You're not betraying yourself by changing the story. You're not being inauthentic by questioning the narrative you've been living inside of. You're not losing yourself by letting go of a definition that was always too small to contain you anyway. You're finding yourself, your actual self. Not the self you decided you were when you were young and scared and trying to make sense of things that were too big to understand, but the self you are now, the self you're becoming, the self that's more complex, more contradictory, more interesting than any single story could capture. So what would happen if you let the story evolve? If you let it be more complex? If you let yourself be more complex? What if instead of, I am someone who ... you said sometimes I, and sometimes I, and I'm still figuring out why, and that's okay? What if instead of having one definitive narrative about who you are, you allowed yourself to be multiple, variable, context-dependent, ever-changing? What if you gave yourself permission to surprise yourself, to contradict yourself, to be different than you've always been, without that meaning you were lying before, or you re-lying now? You could do that. You could release yourself from the prison of your own narrative. You could let yourself be bigger than the story you've been telling. And yes, that's uncertain. That's uncomfortable. That means not knowing exactly who you are at all times. That means being more of a mystery to yourself. But it also means freedom. It means possibility. It means you're not doomed to repeat the same patterns forever. Just because that is who you are, you can be someone different. You can become someone different. You're already someone different than you were. And you're not yet who you'll be. And all of that is true at the same time. The story you tell yourself about yourself, it doesn't have to be fixed. It can evolve, it can grow, it can become more accurate, more compassionate, more true to the full complexity of who you actually are. So tell yourself a new story. Or better yet, tell yourself a story that includes space for you to keep changing, keep growing, keep becoming. Tell yourself a story where you're not a fixed thing but a living thing, not a noun but a verb, not a conclusion but a question that keeps unfolding. Tell yourself a story where anything is still possible, where you haven't figured yourself out completely because there's always more to discover, where you're allowed to surprise yourself, delight yourself, discover capacities you didn't know you had. Tell yourself a story where you're the author, not just the subject, where you have agency, choice, possibility, where the past informs you but doesn't define you, where you can learn from your history without being imprisoned by it. Tell yourself a story where you're allowed to grow, to change, to become, to be multiple things at once, to contain contradictions without needing to resolve them. Tell yourself a story that's big enough to hold all of you, not just the parts that fit the narrative, but all the parts. The consistent parts and the contradictory parts, the parts that make sense and the parts that don't, the parts you understand and the parts that remain mysterious even to you. That's a truer story. That's a more honest story. That's a story worth living inside of. Not because it's comfortable, but because it's real. Because it gives you room to breathe, room to change, room to be human in all the complex, messy, beautiful ways that humans actually are. You are not your story. You are the person living the story, and you get to keep writing it, every day, every moment, every choice. So what story do you want to tell? What story is true enough, generous enough, spacious enough to hold who you actually are? That's the story worth telling. That's the story worth living. That's the story that sets you free. You know exactly what kind of love you want. You've always known. You want the kind of love that sees you. Not the version of you that you present to the world, but the actual you, the messy you, the complicated you, the you that exists at 3 a.m. when all the performances have ended. You want love that's steady, that does unfluctuate based on your mood or your productivity or how well you're managing to hold yourself together on any given day. Love that's just there, constant, like the ground beneath your feet. You want love that's patient, that doesn't rush you to heal faster, to get over things, to be less affected by things that affect you. Love that can sit with you in your pain without trying to fix it, without making it about them, without needing you to be okay so they can be okay. You want love that's curious, that asks questions not as interrogation but as genuine interest, that wants to understand how you think, why you think that way, what it's like to be you. Love that treats you like a mystery worth exploring rather than a problem to be solved. You want love that's brave, that can handle your intensity, your depth, your tendency to feel things fully. Love that doesn't ask you to be smaller, quieter, easier. Love that can meet you where you are, however you are, without flinching. You know what you want. You've always known. You can feel the shape of it inside you, the way you might feel the shape of a song you couldn't quite remember, but would recognize immediately if you heard it. But you're afraid to want it. You're afraid to admit you want it, because wanting something this much makes you vulnerable. It gives life the power to disappoint you. It sets you up for the fall, so you've learned to want less, to minimize your needs, to convince yourself that you're fine with whatever you can get, that you're not one of those people who needs the fairy tale, that you're realistic, practical, mature enough to accept that love is complicated and imperfect, and you should be grateful for whatever version of it comes your way. But late at night, when you're honest with yourself, you know that's not true. You know you still want the thing you've always wanted. You're just scared of wanting it because you're not sure it exists. And even if it exists, you're not sure it exists for you. Maybe you're too much for that kind of love. Maybe your particular brand of complicated is more than anyone wants to take on. Maybe the kind of person who could love you the way you want to be loved doesn't exist or exists, but would never choose you or exists, and would choose you but you'd somehow ruin it because you ruin everything eventually. These are the stories you tell yourself. The stories that keep you safe from disappointment by preemptively disappointing yourself. The stories that protect you from rejection by rejecting yourself first. But what if those stories aren't true? What if you're not too much? What if the right person wouldn't experience your depth as a burden but as a gift? What if the love you want is possible? Not guaranteed, not promised, not something you can control or manufacture or earn through being good enough, but possible, available, something that exists in the world and could exist for you. Would you let yourself want it then? Would you let yourself hope for it? Would you let yourself stay open to it, instead of closing down, settling for less, convincing yourself that less is all you deserve? Because here is what happens when you minimize your wants. You end up in relationships that feel like compromises, with people who are fine, who are nice, who check boxes but don't touch something essential in you. And you tell yourself, this is mature, this is realistic, this is what grown-up love looks like, but it's not. It's just what defended love looks like. It's what love looks like when you're too scared to want what you actually want, so you settle for what feels safe, what feels achievable, what feels like it won't hurt too much when it inevitably disappoints you. And then it does disappoint you. Of course it does, because you chose it knowing it wasn't what you wanted. You chose it as a compromise. You chose it because you decided that what you actually wanted was too much to ask for. But what if it isn't? What if wanting deep, real, steady, patient, curious, brave love isn't too much? What if it's just ... what you want? And what if you're allowed to want it without apologizing for wanting it? You don't have to lower your standards. You don't have to make yourself easier to love by wanting less. You don't have to settle for relationships that feel like negotiations, where you're constantly trading away parts of yourself in exchange for someone else's presence. You can want what you want. You can hold out for it. You can refuse to settle for less. And yes, that might mean being alone longer. That might mean more disappointment. That might mean watching other people find their people while you're still looking for yours. But it also might mean finding something real, finding someone who actually sees you, finding love that doesn't require you to be smaller or simpler or easier than you are. And even if you never find it, even if the love you want never shows up in the exact form you imagine it, there is something valuable in letting yourself want it anyway, because wanting it keeps you honest, it keeps you from settling, it keeps you from abandoning yourself just to avoid being alone. It keeps some part of you alive and hopeful and refusing to accept less than you deserve. The love you're afraid to want isn't a fantasy. It's not unrealistic. It's not too much to ask for. It's just love, real love. The kind that actually nourishes instead of depletes. The kind that makes you more yourself instead of less. The kind that feels like coming home instead of like performing. And you deserve that. You've always deserved that. Even when you convince yourself you don't. Even when you settle for less because less feels safer. Even when you minimize your wants because wanting feels too vulnerable. You deserve love that is as deep and real and steady as the love you are capable of giving. You deserve someone who can meet you in your depth instead of asking you to stay in the shallow end. You deserve to be seen, known, chosen, loved for exactly who you are. And wanting that doesn't make you demanding. It doesn't make you unrealistic. It doesn't make you too much. It just makes you someone who knows their worth. Someone who refuses to abandon themselves just to avoid being alone. Someone who's brave enough to keep hoping even when hope feels dangerous. So let yourself want it. Let yourself hope for it. Let yourself stay open to it. Not desperately. Not with attachment to a specific timeline or a specific person or a specific outcome. But with a quiet, steady knowing that you deserve good things. That love is possible. That somewhere out there, the love you want is wanting you too. And until it finds you, or you find it, you can practice giving yourself that kind of love. You can see yourself the way you want to be seen. You can be patient with yourself the way you want someone else to be patient with you. You can meet yourself in your depth instead of asking yourself to stay shallow. You can be the love you're looking for, not as a replacement for finding it elsewhere, but as a foundation, as proof that this kind of love exists, as evidence that you're worthy of it. Because you are. You've always been. You always will be. Whether you believe it or not. Whether you find it or not. Whether you let yourself want it or not. You deserve the love you're afraid to want. And someday, maybe, you'll let yourself have it. You keep thinking there will be a moment when everything finally makes sense. When all the pieces fall into place. When the confusion clears. When you finally understand yourself, your life, what any of this has been about. You keep thinking there will be an ending, a resolution. A conclusion where everything that's been building finally pays off and you can say, that's what it was all for. That's why it had to happen that way. That's the meaning I've been searching for. But that moment doesn't come. The ending doesn't arrive. The resolution keeps getting postponed. And you keep living in this middle space, this in-between, this perpetual state of not yet resolved. And it's exhausting, isn't it? This waiting. This sense that your real life is always just about to start. Always just around the corner, always dependent on one more thing falling into place. You'll feel better when, you'll figure it out once. Everything will make sense after. You just need to get through this, and then But this keeps becoming another. The thing you're waiting for becomes something else you're waiting for. The resolution you hoping for reveals itself to be just another step in a longer process that might not have an end at all. And you start to wonder, what if there is no ending? What if nothing ever fully resolves? What if life is just this perpetual middle, this ongoing process, this constant state of figuring it out without ever fully figuring it out? What if you're not supposed to arrive anywhere? What if there is no moment when you can finally stop, exhale, and say, I made it? What if it's just this? Just the continuous unfolding of moments, some hard and some easy, some clear and some confusing, but never culminating in some grand finale where everything suddenly makes sense. That's a difficult thing to accept, because we're raised on stories that have endings. Stories where the hero overcomes the obstacle and lives happily ever after. Stories where suffering has meaning, where struggle leads to triumph, where everything happens for a reason that eventually becomes clear. But real life doesn't work that way. Real life is messy, ambiguous, inconclusive. You don't overcome your demons once and for all. You negotiate with them repeatedly. You don't heal completely. You heal enough to keep going, and then you heal a little more, and then you discover new wounds you didn't know you had. You don't arrive at wisdom. You don't achieve enlightenment. You don't figure yourself out and then stay figured out. You're constantly becoming, constantly discovering, constantly revising your understanding of who you are and what your life means. And there's grief in that, isn't there? Grief for the ending that never comes. Grief for the resolution you're not going to get. Grief for the version of your life where everything made sense and added up to something coherent and meaningful. But there's also liberation in it. Because if there's no ending you're supposed to reach, then you can stop waiting. You can stop postponing your life until you've healed enough, grown enough, figured out enough. You can stop treating this moment as preparation for some future moment that will finally be the real one. This is the real moment. This is your real life, right now, exactly as it is. Not perfect, not resolved, not making complete sense, but real, present, yours. And maybe that's enough. Maybe the point isn't to reach some conclusion. Maybe the point is just to be here, to keep going, to stay present to whatever's actually happening instead of waiting for what you think should be happening. Maybe you don't need everything to make sense. Maybe you don't need every question answered. Maybe you don't need to understand why things happened the way they happened, or what they all mean, or where they're all leading. Maybe you just need to be with what is, with yourself as you are, with your life as it is, with this moment in all its unresolved complexity. Because this is it. This is the life, not the preparation for life, not the journey toward life, not the difficult part before the good part starts. Just life, the actual, real, happening right now life. And it's not going to suddenly become what you thought it would be. It's not going to neatly resolve. It's not going to provide the ending you've been waiting for. It's just going to keep being this, keep unfolding, keep changing, keep presenting you with new challenges and new joys and new confusions. Keep asking you to be present to it without knowing where it's going or what it means. And you can do that. You've been doing that. You might not feel like you're doing it well, but you're doing it. You're here. You're continuing. You're staying present to your own experience, even when that experience is uncomfortable, confusing, painful. That's the work. Not reaching some destination, not achieving some goal, not becoming some final, finished version of yourself, but just this. Just showing up to your own life. Just being present to what is. Just continuing to engage with your experience even when you don't understand it. There's no ending coming that's going to make all of this make sense. There is no moment when you're going to look back and see how it all fit together perfectly. There is no resolution waiting for you once you've done enough work, or healed enough wounds, or figured out enough things. There's just this moment, this life, this you, ongoing, unfinished, in process, always becoming, never quite arriving, and that's okay. That's how it's supposed to be, not because it's perfect, but because it's real, because it's yours, because it's happening right now. And right now is the only time anything ever happens. So you can stop waiting. You can stop looking for the ending. You can stop treating this moment as a stepping stone to some future moment that will finally be good enough, meaningful enough, resolved enough. You can just be here, in the middle, in the not knowing, in the unresolved, in the perpetual process of becoming without ever being finished. You can be here, exactly as you are, in a life that's exactly as it is. Without knowing where it's going or what it means or when it will make sense. You can be here anyway. You can keep going anyway. You can find meaning in the not knowing, purpose in the process, peace in the perpetual middle, because this is it. This is the life. This is the only one you get. And it's not going to suddenly transform into something else. It's not going to give you the ending you're waiting for. It's just going to keep being this, and you're just going to keep being you. And somehow, impossibly, that's enough. It's always been enough. Even when it doesn't feel like it. Even when you're sure it isn't. Even now, especially now. This unfinished, unresolved, imperfect now. This is the life. This is it. And you're here. You're living it. You're doing it. Even when it's hard. Even when it's confusing. Even when it doesn't make sense. You're here. And that's the only ending you need. Not an ending at all. Just this. Just continuation. Just presence. Just the ongoing miracle of being alive and aware and here. That's it. That's everything. That's enough. And now you're here. At the end of these words. At the end of this night, or this hour, or this moment you've been spending with yourself. And maybe something has shifted. Or maybe nothing has. Maybe you feel different, or maybe you feel exactly the same. And both of those are okay. Because this wasn't about fixing you. You were never broken. This was just about being with you. Being with the parts of you that don't usually get attention. The parts that exist in the quiet hours. The parts that feel too much, think too much, carry too much. You've been holding your breath for so long. Not literally, maybe, but in some deeper way. Holding yourself tight. Holding yourself together. Holding yourself in, waiting for permission to exhale. Waiting for it to be safe to let go. And maybe it's still not safe. Maybe the world is still demanding. Maybe tomorrow is still coming with all its obligations. Maybe nothing about your external circumstances has changed. But maybe, right now, in this moment, you can take a breath. A real one. The kind that goes all the way down. The kind that lets something release. Not forever. Not permanently. Just right now. Just this one breath. Just this one moment of not holding yourself quite so tightly. You don't have to have figured anything out. You don't have to have resolved anything. You don't have to have arrived at any conclusions, or made any decisions, or committed to any changes. You just have to breathe. You just have to be here. You just have to let this moment be exactly what it is. Not perfect, not profound, not life-changing. Just this. Just you, being you, exactly as you are, in exactly this moment. And that's enough. It's always been enough. You've always been enough. Even when you didn't believe it. Even when you were sure you weren't. Even now, especially now, you are enough. All the things you carry, all the things you've survived, all the things you've felt and thought and worried about and tried to fix, all the versions of yourself that you've been and the version you are now, all of it, all of you, enough, complete, whole, exactly as you are. Not because you've done everything right, not because you've healed all your wounds, not because you've become the person you think you should be, but because you're here, because you're alive, because you're still trying, still feeling, still hoping, still being, despite everything that's tried to convince you not to be. That's the miracle, not some grand transformation, not some perfect resolution, not some moment of finally having it all figured out. Just this, just you, just continuing, just being, just breathing. So breathe, let yourself breathe. Let yourself be exactly as tired as you are, exactly as confused as you are, exactly as hopeful or hopeless, or somewhere in between as you are. Let yourself be human, messy, complicated, contradictory, imperfect, struggling, surviving, somehow still here human. Let yourself rest, not because you've earned it, not because you've done enough, but because you're tired, because you need it, because rest is not a reward, it's a necessity, it's permission you don't need to ask for, it's something you can just, take, right now, right here. In whatever room you're in whatever moment, this is for you. You can rest, you can stop, you can let go. You can be done trying so hard for just this moment. You can let yourself be held by this moment, by the simple fact of existing, by the quiet knowledge that you don't have to do anything else right now except be here. Be here, with yourself, with all of you, the parts you like and the parts you don't, the parts that make sense and the parts that don't, the parts you show the world and the parts you hide, all of it. All of you. You're allowed to be all of it. You always have been. Even when you didn't know it. Even when no one told you. Even when you spent your whole life trying to be less or different or better. You're allowed to be exactly this. Exactly you. Exactly now. Without improvement. Without effort. Without becoming anything other than what you already are. And in that allowing, in that surrender, in that simple act of letting yourself be, there's peace. Not because everything's perfect, not because you've figured it out, not because the struggle is over, but because you're finally letting yourself stop struggling, at least for this moment, at least for this breath, at least for right now. And right now is all you ever have. Right now is all anyone ever has. And this right now, this moment, this breath, it's yours. Take it, hold it, let it hold you. Let it be exactly as it is. Let you be exactly as you are. Let this moment be exactly what it needs to be, which is simply this, simply here, simply now, simply you, simply breath, simply being, simply rest. That's all. That's everything. That's enough. You're enough. You've always been enough. You'll always be enough. Whether you believe it or not, whether you feel it or not, whether you know it or not, you're enough, and you're here. And that's the only thing that matters. That's the only thing that's ever mattered. Just this, just you, just now, just breath, just being, just rest, finally, rest. And in the silence that follows, there's nothing more that needs to be said, nothing more that needs to be done, nothing more that needs to be fixed or understood or resolved. Just you, just breathing, just being, just here, in this room, in this moment, in this life, exactly as you are, exactly as it is. Enough, always enough, forever enough. Rest now. You can rest now. You're allowed to rest now. Rest. You wake up and the world is still here, not changed, not transformed, not suddenly easier or clearer or more forgiving than it was before you closed your eyes. Just here, the same room, the same light coming through the same window, the same life waiting for you with all its same demands and complications and unresolved questions. And for a moment, you feel it, that familiar disappointment, that recognition that nothing has fundamentally shifted, that you're still you, with all the same patterns and struggles and fears you went to sleep with. The moment of rest, the moment of peace, the moment of finally letting go, it was real, it happened, but it didn't fix everything, it didn't erase anything, it didn't make you into someone who doesn't carry what you carry. And there's something tender in that realization, isn't there? You're still here, still you, still human in all the ways that being human is difficult, still carrying the weight you've always carried, still navigating the same internal landscape you've been navigating for as long as you can remember. But something is different. Not everything, not dramatically, but something. Maybe it's just that you slept. Maybe it's just that you gave yourself permission to stop, to rest, to not have to be anything for anyone for a few hours. Maybe it's just that you made it through another night, and here you are, still breathing, still continuing, still showing up to your own life. That's not nothing. Even though it feels like nothing, even though the world doesn't acknowledge it, even though there's no reward for simply persisting, no recognition for the quiet heroism of just keeping going. You know what you did. You know what it took. You know that getting through yesterday and last night and every moment that led you here required something from you, required strength you didn't know you had, required resilience that nobody sees because it doesn't look like the kind of resilience that gets celebrated. It just looks like waking up, making coffee, taking a shower, getting dressed, moving through the day, showing up to the obligations that don't stop just because you're tired, pretending to be fine when you're not fine because being not fine in public feels too complicated, too burdensome, too much, but you do it anyway. You do it again. You do it every single day, even the days when doing it feels impossible. And maybe today will be hard. Maybe today will require all the same effort, all the same pretending, all the same careful management of your internal state so that your external state remains acceptable. Or maybe today will be different, not dramatically different, not life-changingly different. But maybe today you'll remember, even briefly, that you're allowed to be tired, that you're allowed to need things, that you're allowed to be exactly as you are without apologizing for it. Maybe today you will catch yourself mid-performance and think, I don't have to do this right now. I can just be. I can just be honest. I can just say I am not okay, or I need help, or I can't do this right now, without immediately following it with reassurances that you'll be fine, that you'll figure it out, that they don't need to worry about you. Maybe today you'll let someone worry about you. Maybe today you'll let someone see you. Maybe today you'll take up space in the way you need to take up space, instead of shrinking yourself to fit into the space you think you're allowed to occupy. Or maybe you won't. Maybe today will be like every other day, where you hold yourself together and get through it, and nobody knows how much effort it took. And that's okay too, because you're not performing for them. You're not doing this to prove anything to anyone. You're doing this because you're alive, and being alive means showing up to your life. Whatever that looks like, however imperfectly you do it, you're doing this because you're still here. And being still here, after everything, is its own kind of triumph, even if it doesn't feel like one. The morning comes, the day begins, the world continues, and so do you. Not because you want to, not because it's easy, not because you've figured out how to do it without it hurting, but because you're here. And being here means continuing, and continuing is what you do, what you've always done, what you'll keep doing until you can't anymore. And in that continuing, in that persistent, showing up to your own life, there's something, not meaning, maybe, not purpose, not some grand reason that makes it all make sense, but something, some small ember of something that keeps you going, some tiny spark of hope or curiosity or stubbornness or just ... life, just the basic impulse to keep living, because you're alive, and that's what alive things do. You keep going, you keep trying, you keep showing up, you keep being, even when being is hard, even when you're not sure why, even when it would be easier not to. You keep going anyway. You always have, you always do. And maybe today, maybe just for a moment, you'll recognize that as the extraordinary thing it is. Not dramatic, not heroic in the way stories are heroic, but real, true, yours. The morning after the long night, the continuation after the rest, the next breath after the last breath, the next moment after this moment. You here, still, always, continuing. There's something you've been carrying that you've misidentified. You've been calling it anxiety, or depression, or trauma, or dysfunction. You've been giving it clinical names, diagnostic names, names that make it sound like something wrong with you, something broken, something that needs to be fixed. But what if it's not that? What if it's something else entirely? What if what you've been carrying is actually grief? Not the grief of losing someone, though maybe that's part of it, but bigger grief, older grief. The grief of being human in a world that's not designed for the kind of human you are. The grief of being sensitive in a culture that values toughness. The grief of being deep in a society that rewards superficiality. The grief of being slow in a world that demands speed. The grief of being complex in a system that requires simplicity. You've been trying to fix yourself, to heal yourself, to become less sensitive, less deep, less slow, less complex, to adapt to a world that wasn't built for you, to change yourself into someone who fits more easily into spaces that were never meant to hold someone like you. But what if there's nothing to fix? What if you're not broken? What if what you're re-feeling is not a disorder, but a rational response to being a particular kind of person in a particular kind of world? What if it's grief, just grief? The grief of never quite fitting, the grief of always having to translate yourself, the grief of being too much and not enough at the same time, the grief of watching others move through life with an ease you've never experienced, the grief of knowing that something about the way you rewired makes this all harder for you than it seems to be for other people. That's loss. That's legitimate loss. That's something worth grieving. You've lost the ease others seem to have. You've lost the possibility of being someone who doesn't think so much, feel so much, notice so much. You've lost whatever it is that makes life feel simple and straightforward and manageable for people who aren't you. And nobody's ever acknowledged that loss. Nobody's ever said, it makes sense that you're sad about this. It makes sense that you're tired. It makes sense that sometimes you feel overwhelmed by simply existing in a world that was undesigned with you in mind. Instead, they've pathologized it. They've called it anxiety, depression, oversensitivity, overthinking. They've given you diagnoses that suggest something is wrong with you, rather than acknowledging that maybe something is wrong with the fit between you and the world you're retrying to live in. And you've internalized that. You've accepted that you're the problem. That if you could just manage your anxiety better, if you could just think less, if you could just be more resilient, more adaptable, more capable of handling what everyone else seems to handle without complaint, then you'd be fine. But what if you wouldn't be fine? What if being fine requires you to be someone you're not? What if being fine means numbing the very things that make you you? What if instead of trying to fix yourself, you just let yourself grieve? Let yourself feel the sadness of being this kind of person in this kind of world. Let yourself acknowledge that it's hard, that it's been hard, that it will probably continue to be hard in ways that others don't understand because they're not experiencing what you're re-experiencing. Grief doesn't need to be fixed. Grief just needs to be felt. Grief needs to be witnessed, acknowledged, allowed to exist without immediately being transformed into something more palatable, more productive, more positive. You can be sad about this. You can be angry about this. You can wish things were different. You can wish you were different. You can rage against the unfairness of being wired in a way that makes everything harder. And none of that means you're not also okay. None of that means you're not also capable, functional, doing your best. You can be grieving and living at the same time. You can be sad about the hand you've been dealt and still playing the game. That's what you've been doing all along. You've been grieving while pretending you're not grieving. You've been carrying loss while calling it something else. You've been in mourning for a version of life, a version of yourself, that was never available to you. And that's exhausting. Pretending you're not grieving is more exhausting than just grieving. Trying to fix what isn't broken is more exhausting than accepting what is. So what would happen if you just let yourself grieve? If you stopped trying to solve this, cure this, overcome this, and just acknowledged, this is hard for me. This has always been hard for me. This will probably always be hard for me. And that's sad. And I'm allowed to be sad about it. You don't have to be grateful for the struggle. You don't have to find the silver lining. You don't have to believe that this has made you stronger or wiser or more compassionate or whatever other redemptive narrative people tell about difficulty. Maybe it has, maybe it hasn't, maybe it's both, but you don't have to spin it into something positive to validate your experience of it. You can just let it be what it is: hard, sad, unfair, a source of ongoing grief that you carry alongside everything else. And maybe in acknowledging that, in calling it by its real name instead of by diagnostic names that suggest it's your fault, your pathology, your failure to adapt, maybe in that honesty there's some relief. Relief from trying to fix what isn't fixable. Relief from trying to become someone you're not. Relief from treating your fundamental nature as a problem to be solved rather than a reality to be lived with. You are who you are. You feel what you feel. You experience life the way you experience it. And sometimes that's beautiful. Your sensitivity, your depth, your capacity to notice and feel and care about things that others miss. And sometimes it's hard. Sometimes it's overwhelming. Sometimes it's too much. Sometimes you wish you could be simpler, easier, less affected by everything. Both of those things are true. And you can grieve the hard parts while also appreciating the beautiful parts. You can be sad about what this costs you while also valuing what it gives you. You can hold both. You can be both. You can live in the tension between wishing you were different and knowing you wouldn't actually want to be different. Because being different would mean losing the things about yourself that you value most. That's complex. That's contradictory. That's human. That's grief. Real, legitimate, ongoing grief for the complexity of being exactly who you are. And you're allowed to feel it. You've always been allowed to feel it. You just needed someone to tell you that what you're feeling has a name, and the name isn't disorder. The name is grief. And grief is human. And you're allowed to be human. You're allowed to grieve. You're allowed to be sad about the particular ways that being you is hard. That doesn't make you weak. That doesn't make you broken. It doesn't mean you need to be fixed. It just makes you honest. It just makes you aware. It just makes you someone who is willing to feel what they feel instead of pretending they feel something else. And that's brave. That's the bravest thing you can be. Not someone who overcomes their grief, but someone who acknowledges it, who lives with it, who makes space for it alongside everything else. You're grieving. You've been grieving. And that's okay. That's human. That's real. And you don't have to call it anything else anymore. Do you remember who you were before? Before you learned that being yourself was too much? Before you discovered that your natural way of being made other people uncomfortable? Before you realized that survival required performance? That love required modification? That belonging required becoming someone other than who you actually were? There was a version of you that existed before all that. A version that was unedited, unfiltered, unself-conscious. The version that didn't yet know that who they were wasn't acceptable. That version laughed without checking first if their laugh was too loud. That version cried without worrying if their tears were manipulative. That version asked questions without fear of seeming stupid. That version needed things without apologizing for needing them. That version was whole, not perfect. Not without flaws or difficulties or struggles. But whole in the sense of being intact, undivided, not yet split into the version they showed the world and the version they hid. And then something happened, or many things happened, small moments that accumulated, subtle messages that added up, looks, tones, silences, words that were said or not said, reactions that taught you that being yourself came with consequences. Maybe someone told you to stop crying, to calm down, to not be so sensitive, to toughen up, and you learned that your feelings were too much, that emotional expression was weakness, that you needed to control yourself better. Maybe someone laughed at you when you were being sincere, when you were excited about something they thought was silly, when you asked a question they thought was obvious, and you learned that authenticity was dangerous, that sincerity made you vulnerable to mockery, that you needed to be more guarded. Maybe someone got angry when you expressed a need, when you asked for something, when you wanted attention or care or help, and you learned that having needs was burdensome, that wanting things was selfish, that you needed to be more self-sufficient. Maybe you just watched how the world responded to other people like you, watched who got rejected, excluded, ridiculed, watched which behaviors got punished and which got rewarded, and you learned fast. You learned what you needed to hide, and so you started hiding, you started performing, you started becoming the version of yourself that seemed safer, more acceptable, more likely to be loved, or at least tolerated. You learned to laugh at the right moments, even when things weren't funny. You learned to hide your tears even when you were genuinely sad. You learned to pretend you didn't care about things you cared deeply about. You learned to minimize your needs, to apologize for taking up space, to make yourself smaller in every possible way. And it worked, sort of. You became more acceptable. People found you easier to be around. You learned how to navigate social situations without embarrassing yourself. You learned how to be normal, or at least normal enough. But something was lost in that process. Someone was lost. The person you were before you learned to hide. They got buried, pushed down, locked away in some interior room where they couldn't cause problems anymore. And you've been living without them ever since. Living as the performed version, the acceptable version, the version that knows how to behave, how to fit in, how to be what others need you to be. And maybe you don't even miss that original version. Maybe you barely remember them. Maybe they've been gone so long that the performed version feels like the real you, and you can't imagine being any other way. Or maybe you do miss them. Maybe you feel their absence like a phantom limb. Maybe, sometimes, in private moments, you can still feel them stirring inside you, still wanting to laugh too loud, still wanting to cry without shame, still wanting to be exactly as they are without modification. And maybe you wonder, is it too late? Is that person gone forever? Have I been performing for so long that there's nothing authentic left? Have I become the mask I've been wearing? And the answer is, no, that person is still there, buried, maybe, forgotten maybe, but not gone, never gone. Because you can't actually erase who you fundamentally are. You can hide it, you can suppress it, you can build elaborate structures around it, but it's still there, underneath everything, and sometimes it leaks out. Sometimes you catch yourself laughing, your real laugh, before you remember to modulate it. Sometimes you cry before you remember you're not supposed to. Sometimes you say what you actually think before the filter kicks in, and you feel embarrassed, exposed, like you made a mistake, like you let something slip that you were supposed to keep hidden. But what if those aren't mistakes? What if those moments when your authentic self breaks through the performance? What if those are the moments when you re-most yourself, most real, most alive? What if the person you were before you learned to hide is still there, still trying to exist, still pushing against all the layers you've built around them? And what if you let them? What if you stopped treating your authentic self like something to be managed, controlled, kept in check? What if you started making space for that person again? Not all at once, not recklessly. You still need to function in the world. You still need to navigate relationships and work in society. Some level of filtering is necessary. Some level of adaptation is practical. But maybe you could let that person breathe a little more. Maybe you could give them more moments of expression. Maybe you could stop treating every impulse toward authenticity as something to be immediately suppressed. Maybe you could practice being yourself in small ways, with safe people, in private spaces, just to remember what it feels like, just to reconnect with that person you used to be before you learned that being them was unsafe. Because here's the thing, there's still you. They never stopped being you. All these years of performing, all these layers of protection, all these strategies for being acceptable, they've been protecting that core person, yes, but they've also been preventing you from being them. And maybe it's time to start peeling back some of those layers. Time to start letting that person emerge again. Time to stop treating who you really are as something shameful that needs to be hidden. It's scary. Of course it's scary. You learned to hide for good reasons. Those reasons might still be valid. The world might still punish authenticity. People might still prefer the performed version, but you're not doing this for them. You're doing this for you. For the person you were before you learned to hide. For the person who's been waiting all this time to be allowed to exist again. You owe them that. You owe yourself that. The chance to be real again. The chance to be whole again. The chance to stop living divided and start living integrated. It won't be perfect. It won't be easy. You'll still need to perform sometimes. You'll still need to be strategic about when and where and with whom you're fully yourself. But you can start. You can begin the process of remembering, of reconnecting, of allowing that authentic self to have more space, more voice, more presence in your life. That person is still there, waiting, hoping, believing that maybe, someday, it will finally be safe enough to come out. Maybe today is that day. Maybe not fully, maybe not completely, but maybe a little. Maybe just enough. Enough to remember who you were. Enough to feel what it's like to be real again. Enough to know that person isn't lost. They've just been hidden, and you can find them again. You can be them again. You can integrate them back into who you are now. The person you were before you learned to hide. They're still you. They've always been you. And they're ready, whenever you are, to finally be allowed to exist again. You look at other people's lives, and you wonder what you're doing wrong. Not all the time, not obsessively, but enough. Enough that it colors your experience of your own life. Enough that you unfully enjoy what you have, because you're too busy noticing what they have, that you do until they seem lighter somehow, less burdened, like they're moving through life with a grace you can't quite access, like they have a manual you were never given, a map you never received, instructions you somehow missed. They have relationships that look easy, jobs that seem fulfilling, lives that appear coherent, purposeful, moving in clear directions toward meaningful goals. They seem to know what they're doing. They seem to be doing it well. And you look at your own life and it feels ... messier, more complicated, more full of false starts and wrong turns and things that didn't work out the way you thought they would. You look at your relationships, the ones you have, the ones you don't have, the ones that ended, the ones that never quite began, and they feel harder than what other people seem to experience, more fraught, more complicated, more likely to go wrong in ways you can't predict or prevent. You look at your career, your path, whatever you're doing with your days, and it doesn't feel like a career or a path. It feels like improvisation, like you're making it up as you go, like you're still figuring out what you want to be when you grow up, even though you're supposedly already grown up. You look at your internal experience, the anxiety, the overthinking, the constant questioning, and you wonder why others don't seem to struggle with this, why they seem more certain, more settled, more at peace with themselves and their lives. And you tell yourself you shouldn't compare. You know comparison is the thief of joy. You know everyone has struggles you can't see. You know social media is a highlight reel. You know all the rational reasons why comparison is pointless, but you still do it. You can't help it, because the comparisons aren't really about them. They're about you. They're about the fear that you're doing it wrong, that you're falling behind, that everyone else figured out something you didn't figure out, and now you're lost and they're not. And the gap between you is widening every day. And here's what makes it worse. Sometimes the comparison is with past versions of yourself, with who you thought you'd be by now, with the timeline you had in your head about how your life would unfold. You thought you'd have more figured out by this age. You thought you'd be further along. You thought certain things would have happened that haven't happened. You thought certain struggles would be over by now. And instead, you're here, still struggling with the same things, still uncertain about the same questions, still feeling like you're behind some invisible schedule that everyone else is keeping except you. But here's what you need to understand. That schedule doesn't exist. That timeline you had in your head, it was never real. It was just a story you told yourself about how life was supposed to go. And it wasn't based on your actual life, or your actual circumstances, or your actual self. It was based on ... what society's expectations, your parents' dreams, some generic idea of success that you absorbed without questioning. Real life doesn't follow schedules. Real life doesn't unfold in neat, predictable stages. Real life is messy, non-linear, full of detours and setbacks and changes in direction that you never saw coming. And those people you're comparing yourself to, they're experiencing that too. They're just not posting about it. They're just not showing you that part. They're just presenting the version of their life that looks together, that looks successful, that looks like they know what they're doing, but they don't know what they're doing either. Nobody does. Everyone is making it up as they go. Everyone is improvising. Everyone is dealing with their own version of the uncertainty and complexity and struggle that you're re-dealing with. They're just better at hiding it, or they're genuinely less aware of it, or their struggles are different from yours, so they don't recognize them as struggles. But they're struggling too. They're uncertain too. They're messy too. You're not behind. You're not falling short. You're not doing it wrong. You're just doing it your way, at your pace, with your particular set of circumstances and challenges and capacities. And your way is never going to look like their way. Your pace is never going to match their pace. Your life is never going to unfold according to their timeline or anyone else's timeline. It's only ever going to unfold according to your timeline, which is less of a timeline and more of a wandering path, a meandering river, a story that doesn't know its own ending yet. And that's okay. That's how it's supposed to be. Your life is supposed to be yours. Unique, unrepeatable, incomparable, literally, because there's nothing else to compare it to. There's no other you living some other version of your life that you can measure yourself against. There's just this life, this version, this path, messy and uncertain and full of detours as it is. This is it. This is yours. And it doesn't need to look like anyone else's to be valid, meaningful, worthwhile. So maybe you can stop comparing. Not because comparison is bad or wrong, or something to feel guilty about, but because it's not serving you. It's not giving you useful information. It's not helping you live your life better. It's just making you feel bad, making you feel less than, making you feel like you're failing at something when you're not actually failing. You're just being you, living your life, doing your best with what you have, and that's enough. It's always been enough. Even when it doesn't look like enough compared to what others have, or what you thought you'd have by now. You're enough. Your life is enough. Your pace is enough. Your path is enough. Exactly as it is, exactly as you are. Right now, your life, not perfect, not ideal, not what you imagined, but real, true, yours. And that makes it enough. That makes it exactly what it needs to be. So let them have their lives. Let them walk their paths. Let them move at their pace. It has nothing to do with you. It tells you nothing about whether you're doing it right. You're doing it right for you. You're living your life the only way you can live it. And that's not just enough. That's everything. That's the whole point. Your way, your pace, your path, incomparable, unrepeatable, irreplaceable, yours. You're not going to have a moment of sudden enlightenment. You're not going to wake up one day completely healed, fully integrated, permanently at peace. You're not going to have a breakthrough that solves everything, that answers all your questions, that resolves all your struggles once and for all. That's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. Peace, real peace, the kind that lasts, the kind that sustains you, isn't something that happens to you. It's something you build, slowly, incrementally, piece by piece, day by day, choice by choice. It's built from small moments. Moments when you choose to be kind to yourself instead of cruel. Moments when you choose to rest instead of push. Moments when you choose to be honest instead of perform. Moments when you choose to stay instead of run. Each moment is a piece, small, seemingly insignificant, easy to dismiss, easy to think it doesn't matter. This one moment, this one choice, this one small act of self-compassion or courage or presence. But it does matter. Each piece matters. Each moment adds up. Each choice builds on the last choice. And slowly, without you quite realizing it's happening, you're constructing something. Not a perfect piece. Not a permanent piece. Not the kind of peace that means you'll never struggle again, never doubt again, never feel pain or fear or uncertainty again, but a practical peace, a lived peace, the kind of peace that comes from having been through hard things and survived them, from having felt difficult feelings and not been destroyed by them, from having faced yourself honestly and not turned away. That's the peace you're building, slowly, imperfectly, with whatever materials you have available. Some days you have good materials, good moments, moments when you make choices that add strong, solid pieces to the structure you're building. Moments when you can feel yourself growing, healing, becoming more yourself. Other days the materials are poor. The moments are hard. The choices you make are survival choices, not growth choices. You're not building toward peace. You're just trying to get through the day without falling apart. And that's okay. That's part of the process too. Because peace isn't built only from the good days. It's built from the hard days too. from the days when all you did was survive, when all you managed was to not give up. Those days count. Those pieces matter. The piece that says, I survived this, is just as important as the piece that says, I grew from this. Maybe more important, because surviving is the foundation. It's the base layer. It's what everything else is built on. And you've been surviving for so long. You've been adding those foundation pieces for years, maybe decades, without even realizing you were building something. You just thought you were getting through. Just thought you were enduring. Just thought you were doing what you had to do to make it to the next day, the next week, the next moment. But you were building. You've always been building. And now you have this foundation, this base layer of survival, of resilience, of having made it through things you weren't sure you'd make it through. And on top of that, you can build other things. You can add pieces of self-knowledge, pieces of self-compassion, pieces of boundary setting, pieces of authenticity, pieces of connection, pieces of joy when joy is accessible, pieces of rest when rest is possible. Each piece adds to the structure, makes it stronger, more stable, more able to withstand the storms that will inevitably come. Because the storms will come, the hard days will return. The struggles won't end just because you're building peace. But the structure you're building, it can weather those storms. It can hold you through those hard days. It can provide shelter, stability, a sense that you're not starting from zero every time something difficult happens. You have something now, something you've built, something that's yours, something that can't be taken away because you made it yourself, from your own experience, from your own hard-won wisdom, from your own choices to keep going, keep trying, keep showing up to your own life. And it's not finished. It might never be finished. You might spend your whole life adding pieces, reinforcing foundations, rebuilding sections that storms damaged, expanding into new areas as you grow and change. But that's okay. That's how it's supposed to be. Peace isn't a destination. It's a practice. It's something you do, something you build, something you return to over and over. And you're doing it right now, in this moment. You're adding another piece, maybe just by being here. Maybe just by reading these words, maybe just by continuing to show up to your own experience, your own life, your own ongoing process of becoming. That's enough. Each small piece is enough. Each moment of choosing yourself is enough. Each act of survival, of self-compassion, of honesty, of courage, enough. You're building something. You've been building something all along. And even though you unsee the finished structure because it is not finished and might never be finished, you can trust that every piece matters, every choice counts, every moment adds up. You're building peace, from pieces, from moments, from choices, from your own life, lived honestly, imperfectly, courageously, one day at a time. And someday, maybe not soon but someday, you'll look around and realize, I built this, I made this peace, this stability, this sense of being okay, even when things aren't okay. I created this, from pieces, from nothing. From my own determination to keep going, keep growing, keep showing up. And that will be enough. That will be everything. That will be the peace you've been searching for. Not found but built. Not given but earned. Not perfect but real. Your peace, built by you, from pieces of your own life. One moment at a time, forever. And the building continues. It never stops. Because you never stop. Because each day is another opportunity to add a piece. To make a choice that strengthens what you're building. To show up to your own life with whatever you have, whatever you are, however imperfectly you can manage. And that's the work. Not dramatic, not linear, not always visible, but real, true, yours. The slow, patient, ongoing work of building a life you can live in, of building a self you can be, of building peace from whatever pieces you have available. One moment, one choice, one breath, one piece at a time, forever building, forever becoming, forever here. Why am I like this? You've asked it 1,000 times, in 1,000 different forms, with 1,000 different inflections, sometimes with frustration, sometimes with genuine curiosity, sometimes with something that feels like despair. Why do I feel so much when others seem to feel less? Why do I think so much when others seem to just live? Why is everything so complicated for me when it seems simple for them? Why can't I just be normal? Why can't I just be easy? Why couldn't I just be like everyone else who seems to move through life without all this internal noise, all this constant analysis, all this exhausting awareness? You've looked for answers, you've read books, you've gone to therapy, you've taken tests, read articles, searched for frameworks that would explain you to yourself. You've tried on different labels, different diagnoses, different ways of understanding why you are the way you are. And maybe some of those frameworks helped. Maybe they gave you language for what you experience. Maybe they helped you feel less alone. Maybe they explained some things. But they didn't answer the core question, did they? They didn't tell you why. Why you specifically. Why your particular configuration of sensitivity and depth and complexity. Why you got wired this way when others got wired differently. And the truth, the hard truth, the truth that doesn't satisfy, is that there might not be a why. Not in the way you want there to be. Not in the way that would make it make sense, that would justify it, that would redeem all the difficulty of being you. You just are. This way. This particular collection of traits and tendencies and sensitivities. This particular nervous system. This particular brain chemistry. This particular response pattern to the world. Part of it is genetics. Part of it is environment. Part of it is experience, especially early experience. Part of it is just ... chance. The random lottery of how traits combine, how development unfolds, how one thing leads to another until you end up being specifically you. But knowing that doesn't really help, does it? Because you're still you. You're still this way. You're still carrying whatever it is you're carrying. You're still experiencing what you're experiencing. And understanding the mechanisms doesn't make them feel less heavy. So maybe the question isn't, why am I like this? Maybe that's not actually the question that needs answering. Maybe that question is a distraction from a different question, a harder question, a more important question. The question might actually be, now what? Now that I am like this, now that I know this is how I'm wired, how I experience the world, how I move through life, now that I understand that I might always be more sensitive than others, more affected by things, more prone to overthinking and overfeeling and being overwhelmed by existence itself. Now what? What do I do with this? How do I live with this? How do I build a life that works for someone like me, instead of constantly trying to fit into a life designed for someone else? Because that's what you've been doing, isn't it? You've been trying to live a life designed for people who are wired differently. You've been trying to keep up with people who have different capacities. You've been measuring yourself against standards that were never meant for someone with your particular sensitivities, and then wondering why it's so hard, why you're so tired, why you can't just do what everyone else seems to do without all this effort, all this struggle, all this constant sense of barely keeping up. But what if you stopped trying to live their life? What if you started designing a life for yourself? A life that actually accounts for how you are. A life that works with your wiring instead of against it. Not a limited life. Not a small life. Not a life of hiding or avoiding or giving up on things you care about. But a life that is structured around your actual capacities instead of around what you think your capacities should be. A life that includes enough rest. Not as a luxury. Not as something you have to earn. But as a necessity. Because you need more rest than others. Your system processes more. Feels more. Gets overwhelmed more easily. That's not weakness. That's just how you're wired. And it means you need more downtime, more quiet, more space to recover. A life that includes enough solitude, not because you're antisocial, but because you're an introvert, or highly sensitive, or someone who needs alone time to process your own experience. You can't be on all the time the way others seem to be. You need time to yourself. Regular time. Built into your life, not squeezed in when everything else is done. A life that includes enough depth, not just surface interactions, not just small talk and casual friendships, but real connection. Conversations that matter, relationships that go deep, work that means something, because you can't sustain yourself on the shallow end. You've tried, it depletes you more than nourishes you. A life that includes enough creativity, or nature, or beauty, or whatever it is that feeds something essential in you. The thing you keep sacrificing because it seems frivolous, because it doesn't directly contribute to survival or success or responsibility. But you need it. It's not optional for you. It's not a nice to have, it's a need to have. A life that includes enough flexibility, enough room for your moods, your energy levels, your need to sometimes cancel plans or change directions or not know exactly what you're doing, because rigid structures don't work for you. You need more give, more adaptability, more permission to be human and variable and not the same every single day. This is not the life you thought you were supposed to live. It's not the life society tells you to live. It's not the life your parents expected you to live, or your peers seem to be living. It might not be impressive or ambitious or traditionally successful, but it might be sustainable. It might be actually livable for someone like you. It might be the life where you finally stop asking, why am I like this? Because you're too busy living a life that actually works for who you are. And yes, that requires letting go of some things. Letting go of the fantasy that you'll wake up one day wired differently. Letting go of the belief that you should be able to do everything everyone else does. Letting go of the shame about needing what you need. It requires accepting yourself. Not in a feel-good self-help way, but in a practical way. Accepting that this is your actual reality. These are your actual capacities. These are your actual needs. And building your life around that reality instead of around some idealized version of yourself that doesn't exist. It requires disappointing people, disappointing yourself, disappointing the vision you had of who you'd be, how you'd live, what you'd accomplish, disappointing everyone who expects more from you, who thinks you should push harder, who doesn't understand why you can't just ... But the alternative is worse. The alternative is spending your whole life trying to be someone you're not, trying to live a life that doesn't fit you, trying to meet standards that weren't designed for your particular wiring, and slowly, gradually, exhausting yourself into nothing. So maybe it's time to stop asking why you're like this. Maybe it's time to start asking what kind of life someone like you needs. What kind of structure, what kind of rhythm, what kind of balance would actually work for your particular constitution. And then maybe it's time to start building that life. Not perfectly, not all at once, not without mistakes or setbacks or moments of doubt, but building it anyway, one choice at a time, one boundary at a time, one act of self-honoring at a time. You are like this. You've always been like this. You'll probably always be like this, at least in your essential wiring. The question isn't why. The question is what now? What now? Knowing this about yourself. What now? Accepting this about yourself. What now? Working with yourself instead of against yourself. What kind of life can you build? What kind of peace can you find? What kind of existence can you create that actually fits the person you actually are? That's the question. That's the work. Not understanding why you're like this, but learning how to live as someone who's like this. Learning what that requires. Learning what that makes possible. And then doing it. Building it. Living it. Your life. Your way. Designed for you. By you. The only person who actually has to live in it. You're waiting to be done. To be complete. To be the finished version of yourself that you can finally present to the world and say, here, this is me, I'm ready now. But that day isn't coming. That version of you doesn't exist. You're never going to be done. You're never going to be finished. You're never going to arrive at a state of completion where you can finally stop working on yourself, stop growing, stop changing, stop becoming, because you're not a project. You're not a product. You're not something that gets completed and then stays that way forever. You're a process. You're a living, changing, evolving thing. You're different today than you were yesterday, and you'll be different tomorrow than you are today. And that's not failure. That's not evidence that you're not trying hard enough, or healing fast enough, or growing properly. That's just being alive. That's just being human. That's just the fundamental nature of existence. Everything changes, including you, especially you, always you. But you've been treating yourself like a problem to be solved. Like if you just did enough therapy, enough self-work, enough healing, enough growth, you'd finally arrive at the solved version of yourself. The version that doesn't struggle anymore. The version that has healed all their wounds and overcome all their patterns and become the person they're supposed to be. And every time you discover a new wound, a new pattern, a new layer of complexity, you feel like you failed. Like you should have been done by now. Like you're regressing instead of progressing. Like you're never going to get there. But there is no there, there's only here. There's only this ongoing, never-ending process of being alive and conscious and aware of your own experience. There's only this perpetual dance of discovering yourself, losing yourself, finding yourself again, discovering new aspects you didn't know existed. You're not behind, you're not failing, you're not taking too long. You're exactly where you are in a process that doesn't have a finish line because it's not a race. It's just a life, your life. Unfolding in the only way it can unfold, messily, non-linearly, imperfectly, humanly. And you're allowed to be unfinished. You're allowed to still be learning. You're allowed to still be figuring things out. You're allowed to still have wounds that aren't healed, patterns you haven't broken, aspects of yourself you don't fully understand. You're allowed to be in process, permanently, forever, for your whole life, because that's what life is, process, not product, not arrival, not completion. Just ongoing, continuous, never-ending process. And there's something freeing in that, isn't there? If you're never going to be done, then you can stop waiting to be done. You can stop holding yourself back until you're ready. You can stop postponing your life until you've healed enough, grown enough, become enough. You can just live, now as you are, unfinished in process, still figuring it out, still working on things, still discovering new layers and new wounds and new patterns, still learning, still growing, still changing. You can be that person now, the unfinished person, the in-process person, the person who is doing their best with what they have and knows it. Not perfect, but it's real, and it's theirs, and it's enough. You don't have to wait until you're healed to start living. You don't have to wait until you're whole to take up space. You don't have to wait until you're done to matter, to contribute, to connect, to love and be loved. You can do all of that now, as you are, imperfect, incomplete, unfinished, still becoming, always becoming, never quite arriving, but always, always here. And the people who love you, the real people, the ones who actually see you, they don't love the finished version of you. They couldn't. That version doesn't exist. They love this version, the messy version, the in-process version, the version that's trying and struggling and sometimes failing and getting up and trying again. They love your becoming. They love your process. They love the fact that you're still growing, still changing, still discovering new aspects of yourself, even when those discoveries are uncomfortable or painful or revealing of new work to be done. Because that's what love is. Love isn't for the finished version. Love is for the real version. The version that's alive and therefore changing. The version that's human and therefore imperfect. The version that's in process and therefore never quite done. So you can stop waiting. Stop holding yourself back. Stop treating this moment as preparation for some future moment when you'll finally be ready. You're ready now. Not perfectly ready, not completely ready, but ready enough. Ready to be exactly who you are right now. Ready to live your life as it is right now. Ready to connect, to try, to fail, to succeed, to just be here in your imperfect, incomplete, unfinished glory. Because that's what you are. Not a problem waiting to be solved. Not a project waiting to be completed. But a person, a living, breathing, changing person, in process, always in process, beautifully, frustratingly, perfectly in process. And that's not just okay. That's the point. That's what it means to be alive, to be human, to be here, unfinished, incomplete, ongoing, forever becoming, never arriving, always, always in process. And you're allowed to be that. You've always been allowed to be that. You just needed permission. So here it is. You're allowed to be unfinished. You're allowed to be in process. You're re-allowed to be exactly where you are in your journey, without it meaning you're behind, or failing, or not trying hard enough. You're allowed to still be figuring it out. You're allowed to still have work to do. You're allowed to be imperfect, incomplete, always learning, always growing, always discovering new layers of yourself. You're allowed to be human, in all its messy, unfinished, in-process glory. Not someday, not when you're ready, but now, right now, exactly as you are, unfinished, imperfect, incomplete, in process, alive, here, you. And that's not just enough. That's everything. That's the whole beautiful, terrible, extraordinary truth of being human. You're not done. You'll never be done. And that's okay. That's more than okay. That's exactly how it's supposed to be. There's a way you talk to yourself that you would never use with anyone else. A harshness, a cruelty, almost a relentless criticism that you apply only to yourself, that you'd be horrified to hear someone else using with a person they supposedly care about. You notice every mistake. You catalogue every failure. You remember every moment you've fallen short, and you use those moments as evidence. Evidence that you're not good enough, not trying hard enough, not doing it right, not worthy of gentleness, patience, understanding. You give grace to everyone except yourself. You extend compassion to everyone except yourself. You allow everyone to be human, to be flawed, to be imperfect, everyone except yourself. And you think this is discipline. You think this is how you stay motivated, how you keep improving, how you prevent yourself from becoming complacent or lazy or less than you could be. But it's not discipline. It's cruelty. It's a form of violence you're committing against yourself every single day. And it's exhausting. It's depleting. It's destroying you from the inside out, because you can't thrive under constant criticism. Nobody can. You can't grow in an environment where every mistake is catastrophic. Every flaw is unforgivable. Every imperfection is proof of your fundamental inadequacy. You need tenderness. You need gentleness. You need the kind of compassion you give to others. You need someone to be kind to you. And since no one else lives inside your head, since no one else narrates your experience, since no one else provides the constant commentary on your life, that someone has to be you. You have to be tender with yourself. You have to be gentle with yourself. You have to extend to yourself the same grace you extend to others, not as a luxury, not as a reward for doing well enough to deserve it, but as a basic requirement for survival, for sustainability, for not slowly destroying yourself through constant internal criticism. And you know this, intellectually. You know you're too hard on yourself. You know you need to be kinder. You've read the articles. You've heard the advice. You understand, theoretically, that self-compassion is important, but you don't do it. You don't practice it, because some part of you believes that being hard on yourself is necessary, that if you're gentle with yourself, you'll become soft, you'll become weak, you'll stop trying, you'll accept mediocrity, you'll never achieve anything because achievement requires pushing, striving, being harder on yourself than the world will be. But that's not true. That's a lie you've been telling yourself. That's a belief you inherited from somewhere, from parents who were hard on you, from a culture that valorizes suffering, from early experiences that taught you that love is conditional on performance. The truth is different. The truth is that you couldn't perform at your best when you were constantly afraid of your own judgment. You can't take risks when you know you'll punish yourself mercilessly if you fail. You can't be creative when every idea is immediately criticized. You can't grow when every step forward is met with, but it should have been faster, better, more. You need tenderness to thrive. You need gentleness to grow. You need self-compassion to have the courage to try new things, to risk failure, to be vulnerable enough to actually change. Tenderness isn't weakness. Tenderness is strength. Tenderness is what allows you to keep going when things are hard. Tenderness is what helps you recover from setbacks instead of being destroyed by them. Tenderness is what makes growth possible instead of just making you smaller and harder and more defended. So what would it look like to be tender with yourself? What would it feel like to treat yourself the way you treat someone you love? It might mean noticing when you're being harsh and choosing different words, not lying to yourself, not pretending you didn't make a mistake, but responding to mistakes with curiosity instead of condemnation. That didn't work out. I wonder why. What can I learn from this? Instead of "you're such an idiot, you always mess things up, you'll never get this right," it might mean acknowledging when you're tired instead of pushing through. Recognizing that you're human, that you have limits, that you can't run on empty forever. Giving yourself permission to rest without making rest contingent on having earned it. Rest isn't a reward. Rest is a requirement. It might mean celebrating small victories instead of dismissing them. Instead of "that was easy, it doesn't count," or "anyone could have done that," or "but I still have so much more to do, just I did that, good, that matters, I'm proud of myself." It might mean forgiving yourself for being imperfect, for not having all the answers, for still struggling with things you think you should have overcome by now, for being human in all the complicated, messy ways that humans are. It might mean talking to yourself the way you'd talk to a child you're responsible for, not dismissing their feelings, not telling them they're too sensitive or they're overreacting or they need to toughen up, but listening to them, validating them, helping them feel safe enough to express what they're actually experiencing. That's what you need from yourself. That's what the tender part of you has been needing all along. Not criticism, not harshness, not constant demands to be better, do more, try harder, but simple, basic tenderness, simple, basic kindness, simple, basic compassion. You deserve that. You've always deserved that, even when you make mistakes, even when you fall short, even when you're not living up to your own impossible standards. You deserve to be spoken to gently, to be treated with care, to be given the benefit of the doubt, to be forgiven, to be held, even if only metaphorically, even if only by yourself. And when you give yourself that tenderness, something shifts, something softens. The part of you that's been hard and defended and constantly braced for attack, that part can finally relax. That part can finally trust that you're not going to destroy yourself from the inside out. That part can finally stop using all its energy for self-protection and start using it for actually living. Tenderness isn't indulgence. It's not letting yourself off the hook. It's not accepting mediocrity or giving up on growth. It's creating the conditions in which growth is actually possible. It's providing the safety you need to take risks. It's giving yourself the foundation of unconditional self-regard that allows you to try, fail, learn, and try again without each failure feeling like a referendum on your worth as a person. You've been denying yourself this. You've been withholding from yourself the one thing you need most. You've been treating yourself as if you have to earn gentleness through perfect performance, as if tenderness is something that will be available once you finally become good enough to deserve it. But you already deserve it. You've always deserved it, not because you've earned it, but because you're alive, because you're trying, because you're here, doing your best, struggling through, continuing despite everything. That's enough. That's more than enough. That's everything. And it means you deserve tenderness from yourself, from the voice in your head that narrates your experience, from the inner parent who should be caring for you instead of criticizing you. So be tender with yourself. Starting now, starting today, not perfectly, not all the time, but more than you have been, a little bit more gentle, a little bit more kind, a little bit more compassionate. Talk to yourself the way you'd talk to someone you love. Treat yourself the way you'd treat someone who's struggling. Give yourself the grace you give to everyone else. Not in a grand way, not in a way that others necessarily see, but luminous in the way that life is luminous, in the way that consciousness is luminous, in the way that awareness, presence, being these things carry their own light, their own warmth, their own proof of existence. You are that. You've always been that. Underneath everything else, underneath the stories you tell yourself, underneath the patterns you repeat, underneath the wounds you carry, and the weight you hold, and the struggles you endure, underneath all of it, you are light, small light, human light, imperfect light, that flickers and dims, and sometimes seems to disappear entirely, but light, nonetheless. Light that is never, not even once, not even in your darkest moment, gone completely out, because you're still here, still breathing, still being, still carrying that small, stubborn flame of existence through every moment of this strange, difficult, beautiful life. And maybe that's all any of us are. Maybe that's all we've ever been. Small lights in the darkness, finding each other, recognizing each other, saying without words, I see your light, I know your light, because I carry light too. We all carry light, even when we can't see it, even when we've forgotten, even when we're certain we've gone dark. The light remains. The light persists. The light is what we are, at our core, beneath everything we think we are or should be or could become. Just light, just life, just the extraordinary, inexplicable miracle of being conscious, aware. Here, there's a memory you never talk about, a memory that isn't a memory at all, but a feeling, ancient and familiar, that lives somewhere in your body, in your bones, in the spaces between your thoughts. It's the memory of being whole, of being enough, of being exactly what you needed to be, without trying, without performing, without becoming. It's the memory of before the world told you who to be, before you learned what was acceptable and what wasn't, before you started watching yourself from the outside, judging, evaluating, finding yourself lacking. There was a moment, maybe you were very young, maybe you were just born, maybe it was before you were born, when you simply were, when existence was enough, when being alive was the whole point and the whole purpose and the whole story. And then you forgot. We all forgot. We had to forget to survive in a world that demands we be more than just beings, that insists we become doings, achievings, provings. But the memory remains, not in your mind, in something deeper than mind, in your body, in your breath, in the way your heart beats without you telling it to, in the way you heal from wounds without consciously directing the healing, in the way you dream, create, love, persist, all of it happening through you more than by you. The memory remains. You are enough. You have always been enough. Not because you've done enough or become enough or proven enough, but because being is enough. Life is enough. The light you carry is enough. And maybe you'll spend your whole life forgetting and remembering this. Maybe you'll move in and out of knowing it. Maybe some days you'll feel it so clearly it brings tears to your eyes. And other days you'll be so lost in the forgetting that the truth seems impossible, unreachable, a beautiful lie. That's okay. That's the dance. That's being human. Forgetting and remembering. Losing yourself and finding yourself. Moving away from truth and moving back toward it. Over and over. Until the last breath. Until the light finally releases from this particular body and returns to whatever it was before it was you. But for now, you're here. The light is here. In this body, in this moment, in this life that is yours and no one else's. And maybe that's the real memory you never talk about. Not a specific moment from your past, but this moment, right now, happening forever, always new, always here. The memory of being alive, the memory of breathing, the memory of light recognizing itself in the mirror of consciousness, the memory of you, being you, exactly as you are, exactly as you've always been, exactly as you'll always be underneath everything else, luminous, persistent, here, a small light in the darkness, but light nonetheless. Light that has carried you this far and will carry you further still. Light that asks nothing of you except that you let it shine, in whatever small way it can, for whatever time remains. And so the night deepens around you, wherever you are. The room grows quieter. The world outside continues its turning. And you remain, here, in the middle of your own life, your own story, your own ongoing becoming. You don't have to do anything else tonight. You don't have to solve anything or fix anything or become anything. You don't have to be better or stronger or more healed than you are right now. You can just be here, in this quiet, in this darkness, in this moment that asks nothing of you except your presence, your breath, your willingness to keep being the light you've always been. The stars outside, they're doing the same thing, just burning, just being light in darkness, not trying to be brighter than they are, not competing with other stars, not wondering if they're good enough, light enough, worthy enough, just shining, just being what they are, just doing what stars do, which is persist in their luminosity, even when no one is watching, even when their light takes millennia to reach anything, even when they're certain they're too small, too dim, too ordinary to matter. They matter. Their light matters. Your light matters. Not because it illuminates everything, not because it solves anything, not because it's enough to read by or navigate by or live by, but because it is, because it exists, because in the vast darkness of everything that isn't, your light is something that is, and that's enough, that's everything. That's the whole extraordinary truth of existence. Something instead of nothing, light instead of darkness, being instead of not being, you instead of the vast emptiness where you might have been but aren't, because you're here, you're real, you're alive, and maybe you'll dream tonight. Maybe your consciousness will drift into other landscapes, other stories, other versions of yourself moving through impossible worlds. Or maybe you'll just rest in darkness, in silence, in the deep not knowing that comes when the mind finally stops its constant narration. Either way, the light continues, the breath continues, the being continues, you continues. Not because you're trying to, not because you've chosen to, but because that's what life does. It continues. It persists. It insists on itself with a quiet stubbornness that defies all logic, all reason, all evidence that not being might be easier. Being is what you do. It's what you are. It's what you'll keep doing until you can't anymore. And then, who knows? Maybe the light just changes form. Maybe it returns to wherever light comes from. Maybe it becomes part of some larger light, some cosmic luminosity that contains all the small lights that ever were. Or maybe not. Maybe this is it. This one life, this one chance to be specifically you, this one opportunity to carry your particular light through your particular darkness. Either way, you're here now. That's what matters. That's what has always mattered, not what comes after, not what came before, just this, just now, just you, just breath, just being, just light, small light, human light, your light, the light you've been carrying all along without knowing you were carrying it. The light that has been carrying you when you thought you were carrying it. The light that is you and that you are, and that will persist in whatever form. Light persists when bodies can no longer hold it. But tonight, your body holds it. Tonight, you are the vessel for this light. Tonight, you get to be here, breathing, being, experiencing the strange miracle of consciousness, aware of itself. And that's enough. That's more than enough. That's everything there is, everything there's ever been, everything that will ever matter. You, here now, light in darkness, breath in silence, being in the midst of everything that is not, luminous, persistent, enough, always enough, forever enough. Rest now, small light, rest in your own luminosity, rest in the knowing that you are exactly what you need to be, rest in the truth that has been true from the beginning and will be true until the end. You are light, you have always been light, and nothing, not the darkness, not the struggle, not the forgetting, nothing can ever change what you fundamentally are. Luminous, beloved, here, sleep now. The light will still be there when you wake. It always is. It always has been. It always will be. You are the light. The light is you. And that's the only truth you need to carry into your dreams. Good night, small light. Good night, beautiful being. Good night, you. The world is gentler for having you in it. The darkness is less dark because you shine. Rest now. You've earned it. You've always earned it. You never needed to earn it. Always. Just rest. Just be. Just light. Forever. Always. Home. And so, the words dissolve into silence. And the silence is gentle. And you remain, little light in the dark, breathing through the night, carrying your light through one more moment, one more breath, one more proof that you are here. You are real. You matter. Sleep now. The light knows the way back. It always has. You always have. Rest.